So, Rodney, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for hopping on. For those of you who are listening and even watching, Rodney and I have been kind of just chit-chatting, and I said, hey, let's just start because I know that this stuff is helpful to people. So Rodney has been going over some of the things that he's been doing. He got invited to Facebook. You said 2019? Is that what you said?
Yeah, 2019, Dr. Becker and I, when we hit the largest following in the world in the dog community space.
That's great. So we're just chopping it up, but I wanted to include the podcast listeners into the conversation because that's what I like listening to. Is I like listening to people talk, and it interests me a lot. So welcome to the podcast, Rodney. Thanks for being here. So right now, So I found you because a couple of my guests have actually said, Rodney Habib has posted this and he taught me this, and of course Dr. Karen Becker that you work with regularly and partner with on a bunch of different projects. You guys have #1 New York Times best-selling books, and so I'm excited to talk to you because, like I said before, this podcast has given me an opportunity to really be a student and learn as much as I can about dogs. And so why don't you just introduce yourself, if you may, and tell my audience a little bit about who you are and what you're passionate about.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me, brother. It's very exciting. First of all, I think the most exciting thing for me today is it's two dudes on a podcast. Normally in my life, it's always females. I work in the dog health space, so I spend most of my time with females, either interviewing female veterinarians, PhDs, scientists, researchers. Anytime I get to mind jam with another fellow male, it's always ultra exciting. My audience would get it, and maybe your audience is like, I'm not sure what we're talking about here. But I would say, like, I have I've always had a hard time, Tom, explaining what the heck I do. Even I tried to explain to my mother. My mother can't even explain to anybody what the hell I do. I come from a background of a huge passion for science, and I do my best to relay that back to pet parents. So the term citizen science, working with scientists, working with like longevity experts in whatever field that you can think of pertaining to raising the longest lived dog or cat on the planet as possible, and then taking that information and then bringing it down to bite-sized chunks, layman terms, if you may, for whether you're a trainer, whether you're a groomer, whether you're a retailer, or whether you're a pet parent, a young veterinarian, whoever it is that's listening, sharing up-to-date current science in bite-sized chunks, I think would probably be the best way I could explain today. And you ask me again next year, and it'll be a different translation of what the hell I do.
Yeah, but that's good, right? I think people like you and me who, and from what I know about you, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we kind of gone down this non-traditional path of education and grassroots of trying to figure out, like, hey, can I help? And is this working? And can we make dogs and dogs owners, and even in your case, cats as well, can we make pets' lives better? Can we help them live longer? Can we help them live a better life, a better quality of life? And so, from a behavioral standpoint, I just worked with a Boston Terrier not too long ago. Last week, they drove from Michigan, and the dog was, I'm not kidding, Rodney. I mean, the dog was so stressed out of her mind that she couldn't even be in the same room with somebody she didn't know. She was habitually barking. Eyes were popping out of her head. The owner was, very emotional, and she drove all the way from Michigan to work with me in upstate New York, so a 12-hour drive, and she's like, I don't know what to do, right? And so from a behavioral standpoint, I'm so grateful and even blessed to the point where I'm able to help dogs and their owners, live a happier, healthier life. And it sounds like you've done an incredible amount of research and hard work to also develop a message, right? To curate these ideas in these new ways for people to help their dog become healthier, live longer. And the most important thing here, Rodney, I think you and I can relate to this, is you make it easy for people to understand. I have friends in the dog training space, and to your point where you said you hang out with a lot of, and I have multiple doctors on the podcast with PhDs all the time, and sometimes I'm like, what? what did you just say? And so let's just start with this. How can people help their dogs or their cats live a longer, healthier life? What's the lowest hanging fruit?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, brother. It's to answer the first question you had, how long? I've been in the space for 20 years, man. So it's been quite some time, and you get to watch the evolution of sharing information, and you get to watch the change in science. I think probably the most important piece to all of it is, they always say the illiterate of the 21st century is not he who cannot read or write, but rather he who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And let me tell you, Tom, that is a hard process for a lot of people. I'm sure in your space and my space, they're incredible worlds, and they're such much needed worlds, and they're also very visceral worlds, brother. Like, I say this often, like when I start all my talks pertaining to religion, politics, and nutrition, right? Like, if we started off talking about religion and I bring up Gaza, it's going to shut down half of your audience, no matter which way I have the conversation. If I talk about politics, like, hey, are you on the blue side or on the red side? It's going to shut down half your audience. If I get into the dog space, the training space, for the love of God, if I say, are you, I know that people classify, Tom, and you can correct me on this, are you in like positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement? It'll shut down the podcast or the audience very quickly. And in my world, man, you talk about nutrition, brother. It can shut people down very quickly, right? Like, especially the big giant debate between ultra processed food and minimally processed foods. So first and foremost, when you're going to share that information, it's meeting people right in the middle. And to go back to your original question, which is, if we're trying to raise the longest lived pets, what is it that we're trying to achieve first and foremost? So that's why it was really important for Dr. Becker and myself to travel the world and look for the longest lived pets, right? Not talk to that guy down the street that's at the bar that's drunk and getting his advice on, hey, have you ever seen the longest lived pet in the world? He's like, I think my neighbor one time had like a 20-year-old dog, but rather going to visit and look for those long-lived animals, no matter where they are on the globe. Quite recently, that's been all over social media, is Bobby that set the Guinness World Book of Records for not only the longest lived current dog, but maybe the longest lived dog of all time at 31 years of age. So traveling to Portugal and traveling up the mountains looking for these long-lived pets, and then trying to find that common through line in science, what raises them. So what gets them to live so long. So it's that 10,000 foot overview, right? If I'm trying today to raise the longest lived dog, there's so many cofactors. First of all, genetics plays a massive role in it, right? You can't, unfortunately, when you're handed a set of genes, obviously epigenetically we can control some switches in there, but depending on the code that you've been given, your candle wick can only go so long. So genetics plays a massive role into it, right? We'd all love to raise 31-year-old dogs, but if it's not in your genome, you can raise a dog to be long and happy for as long as that genome will allow, let's just say. The next giant component to it is going to be, and the big one that everyone likes to talk about, is diet. So diet, nutrition, so on and so forth, critical for a long-lived pet. And then exercise, optimal movement and exercise, and then stress and environment. You put all that together, it spells dogs, the D.O.G.S strategy. Diet, optimal movement, genetics, and stress and environmental stressors. And if you can lock those down and do the best you can today, according to science, you can do your best to say that you raised one of the longest lived pets on the planet.
Well, it's just like with people, right? Like, our genetics also matter. Like the hand that we were dealt with, we can't control. So that 31, did you ever find that dog in Portugal?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a lot of viral content that we put out there in some videos, lives. It was when the news hit, Tom, it made every major headline across the world. It outtook, I think the number one Google search in the entire world at that time was Donald Trump. like the most famous search on Google ever. Bobby, the 31-year-old dog, trumped that, if you may pardon the pun. Literally became the number one search in the entire world. He made CNN, Al Jazeera, BBC, some of the biggest media networks globally around the world. When we found out about it, we put out a calling to our followers all throughout Portugal and Europe. Does anybody know the owner of this dog? It doesn't matter where it is. We'll get on a plane tomorrow morning and head out there. And we've got some incredible followers and supporters in Portugal that led us to him, where we went up there a few times during the year and tried to live the same lifestyle that dog did in that environment, just to pick up on some cues of what these owners may have done to defy the odds.
And what were they? What were the things that this, like you said, genetic, sure. But what was this dog eating? What was this dog doing every day? What environment? What flowers? What was this? What was it?
Yeah, there's. You know what's really interesting about this, Tom, is when we wrote the first book, The Forever Dog, we could, obviously you and I could fly to these places, get on a plane, and I take you around the world where some of these scientists are currently following these. They call them Methuselah dogs. Methuselah is like the oldest living person in the Bible, if you may. So like a super centenarian, those humans that live to be 100 and beyond, leading those extraordinary lives. Scientists are now following these dogs that the second that they pass 20 years of age and they start creeping into like their later 20s, as they start to follow these animals, what we decided to do originally was, let's take all of this, let's travel, let's collect all the data, but let's not us break it down. Let's take it to the world's top longevity scientists, top human longevity scientists, animal researchers, so on and so forth. Let's take that information to them and break it down. And Tom, you start to, as I mentioned earlier, you see this common through line between a lot of these dogs that we started finding that were in their early 20s, mid 20s, 30s, if you may, arguably, between Bobby and Maggie. The first thing that you notice is, let's just talk behavior, your world. Let's just get right into temperament, if you may. The first thing that you start to notice is that these are the most calm, chill dogs you have ever been around. Like, these dogs are the most socialized creatures that one could be around. It wouldn't matter what type of stressor is around them. So like if I'm a high, anxious, jumping around, angry, releasing a whole bunch of chemo signals of negativity, I don't think I could have ever phased these long-lived dogs. They have the calmest demeanor that you've ever seen. So I think first and foremost, that's really important. We know obviously that stress can shorten your lifespan, and the environment around those dogs pertaining to behavior, the owners seem to be very calm. I'm gonna, as I keep going into this, I want to throw this back at you. When you went to, I believe you said Michigan for this Boston Terrier, how much of your work is fixing the owner that potentially is like the thorn that's painting the dog? Is that a lot of it in your work, or is it just, I got to work on the dog and there's only so much I can do with that owner?
All of it. It's, the dog came to me from Michigan to New York, and all of it is that's why I created and trademarked No Bad Dogs, Rodney, because almost every single dog that I've worked with behavioral issues, which is my bread and butter, my forte and my passion, and frankly what I'm good at, is because the owners have done something, right? Like the owners are the ones who have created this. Either they've enabled the dog to become this reactive, like for an example, that Boston Terrier, which is, if people are listening and watching, will be on my YouTube channel by the time you hear this and watch this. This Boston Terrier was, anybody who walked into the room, the dog would lunge, bark, scream, just absolute chaos. And the stress levels of everybody, not just the dog, Rodney, every single person in the room, the owner's dad, the owner, the dog, me, the videographer, this dog's just screaming. And it's like, yo, what is going on? And so the dogs, unless, again, they have the genetic disposition to become this way, which we can talk about because I have a dog that has the genetic disposition to inherently be reactive because of his protective nature. He came to me at 8 weeks as a reactive dog genetically. Like, that's how the dog is, right? And you can't really change the whole roadmap of that. You mentioned epigenetics, and you could change certain things, and you could pull those levers and manage it, but you can't change. I don't know if you're familiar with borbals, but I have a South African Mastiff. I'm not going to be able to tell this fish not to swim, right? He's a protective dog. But to your point, everything is on the owners, and that is my whole mission. Like, that's why I created No Bad Dogs, is because 99%, let's say 9.5 times out of 10, a dog that comes in with behavioral issues, it's because the owner is allowing these things to happen. So again, that Boston Terrier reacting, lunging, all of the hormones and adrenaline and all the things in the dog is just peaking, just all the way, all the time, panting, constant state of fight or flight, has bitten people. And I took the leash, handled the dog a little bit, and within 24 hours, they came back and hardly any reaction. The owners were incredibly blown away. And, you know, and I don't know, Rodney, if you feel like this sometimes, but you're just like, you could say, sure, it's me or it's you, but it's really common information. I'm just the vehicle here. Like, I'm just, you know, I don't think what I'm doing is proprietary. Or like you, if you talked about ultra processed food versus not, right? Like somebody, oh, Rodney, or you've changed my life. It's like, yeah, but also just think about it, right? So anyway, to your question, yes, it's the owner.
It's interesting because when you're looking, you know, and as I was referencing this to some of these long-lived dogs, when you look at some of the data, Tom, we flew to Italy. The Italians in 2018 put up one of the most famous studies of all time. It literally broke the internet that year, where your dog will smell the chemo signals, your sweat signals on your skin, and within seconds they become that emotion that they're smelling. And so the Italian scientists at that time, were able to show the world, hey, if you're a stressful individual, or if you've had a stressful morning and you may be over it right now, you've locked information in your sweat signals, your chemo signals on your skin. And when a dog comes in, or when you enter a room and a dog's smelling you up and down and analyzing you, they are picking up and reading on how that day went for you. And if you had a really ultra shitty day, man, that dog will start blowing out cortisol so quickly just by what your previous emotions were in that morning. So that's how impactful it is when you are trying to. I often think that I get trainers from all over the world that reach out to us. If you saw my DMs, and we get I'll get some crazy stories, and I'll always have researchers, the trainers reach out and say, okay, I've got A, B, C, and D. Is it my environment do you think here? Am I dealing with this? Am I dealing with that? And I oftentimes think your toolbox has to be so friggin' deep, Tom, because when you're getting yourself into an environment, like you mentioned, the owner, which most of the time when you look at the dynamics of those families, and I'm just going to stick to my lane, which would be in the nutrition lane, you can grow a tumor on a dog. So if you've got a dog with cancer, you can grow a tumor. There's multiple studies that show that you can grow a tumor over a weekend if that environment is a high stress environment within that household of that animal. So the environment is so critical there, right? So this is why when we travel to all these different locations looking at these long-lived dogs, Tom, these homes were calm. The owners were calm. 9 times out of 10, they were farmers. And you'll notice that a lot of these long-lived dogs were free-roaming dogs. So they would go out in the morning and they would come back at night when they wanted. They had friends. You want to talk about when you look at some of the longest lived people in Sardinia, having bonds with people, having a community. I remember interviewing a few behaviorists that would tell me that it's important that your dog has 5 friends at least, having that sort of pack community, if you want to sort of laymanize it in human terms, having those group of friends that you can go out and hang out with and so on and so forth. And all of these dogs had that in their environment. Very calm environments.
Doesn't surprise me. And I think do you have kids, Rodney?
I don't have, unfortunately, I've never been blessed with kids. I'm just such a dog dad that I've got I had three beautiful fur babies. I got my dog now, Shuby, but I do not have kids.
Well, I don't think you need to have kids to know this, but if you're a human, obviously you understand it's the same for you. I mean, the amount of, like I always like to use analogies, and I like to use real world, real life things, right? Like I'm a practitioner. Like I'm not just reading papers and looking at studies, because it's an important part of, I think, what anybody does. But there is a big difference between practitioners and what's on paper and what may look like, things on a trajectory. And it's like, well, I was in the barbershop yesterday, and my son had got his first haircut. He's 3 years old. I was hoping his hair would grow like straight back, like old school. He's got this white pixie dust hair, and I was hoping like we get like the Hulk Hogan vibe, right? Like the mullet in the back and have the flow going. And what ended up happening is it didn't. Okay, so we ended up getting a haircut, and so I was at the barbershop, and the guy says, your son at 3 is better than some third graders that I cut earlier. And I asked the barbers, I mean, what do you guys think that is? They said, and I'm not kidding you, they said it's parenting. Because they go, we have kids in here, and we can tell how the haircut's going to go for the kid just by how the parents come in, how they book appointments, how they are when they're sitting on the couch waiting. The kid matches that, right? So it's the same. Obviously, it's the same thing for dogs. Dogs are not as independent thinkers as humans are, meaning dogs like to kind of grab onto, hey, what are we doing? What are you doing? How are you feeling? How are we feeling? Are we good? Right? Like if you start yelling and screaming, the dogs are going to start looking for a problem, right? Like what's going on? Or in some cases they'll start going to hide. So that makes a lot of sense that dogs who live longer are also in environments where they can thrive, right? Like their nervous system doesn't have to go into crazy mode all the time, and the environment that they're in is calm, cool, and collective. And I see that as that example with my son, but we see it all the time in the doctors, the pediatrician offices. Everyone kind of repeats this same thing. And again, with dogs, it's the same thing. Like an owner comes in and they're, on walks, when we go out, it's really tough because when we see other dogs, and it's like, and then the dog is doing the same thing, constantly looking, fearing, anticipating, waiting. And when you get somebody that comes in, that's just, I mean, not always, because genetics, and in the dog world, in the dog space, we adopt, we ship dog. I mean, people go on vacation to Turks and Caicos and they come home with 3 street dogs, So sometimes the disposition of the dog has already been set. And of course, you being a calm person also helps. But because they have been fighting their whole life for a meal, or have been shot at and kicked at by locals on an island somewhere, their behavior and their temperament, no matter how cool and calm, collective, and zen you are, is not always predicated off of that. But so these dogs that were living past 20, and in your experience, the dog Bobby had lived past 30, the environment was chill. And with the people, were the people older as well with these dogs? I'm just imagining, Rodney, like really old people with really old dogs all just chilling.
Have laid it out any perfectly, more perfect than that. It's interesting when you mention, are you familiar with the Swedish study, Dr. Lena Roth? They did this study on females and dogs, And it made major headlines probably about 5 years ago where your dog mirrors you in terms of cortisol levels. So what scientists were able to see was a female with her dog, over time, the dog will sync to the female's cortisol levels. They match. They mirror each other. You are, it's that cliche term, you are the reflection of your dog, or vice versa. They're able to show you now that if you do have somebody, unfortunately, that's churning out a ton of cortisol, that dog will sync up to that owner. And when you see the owners of these long-lived dogs, they're exactly how you laid it out, Tom. They're older folk. Historically, they live on farms. These dogs are, as I had mentioned earlier, are moving around, working all day. They usually have jobs, right? So a great point was Maggie, the arguably 29 to 30-year-old Kelpie from Australia. Brian McLaren was a dairy farmer, and he would go back and forth to his farm. I would say, and if Brian's listening to this, he'd probably punch me in the face, but I would have to say he's probably in his 60s. God, if he's younger, I'm so sorry, Brian, because I know sometimes farmers can have that wonderful rugged look. But he would go back and forth from his dairy farm every day. The dog would be working for them. If you talk to Brian and you saw his energy and what he would like when in having a conversation with him, his dog mirrored that. I mean, just very, very calm environments. Also, Tom, clean environments, right? Because when we're going to address stress, right? What type of stress are we talking about? You have physical stress, you have emotional stress, you have chemical stress. Chemical stress is a really big problem. But these farms, probably the most cleanest environment that you can think of. These dogs were all constantly moving around through soil. How much research do we have today showing that when you get out, and a dog especially that gets their paws into soil, inside soil, there's like bacteria like Mycobacterium vaccae, which is the Prozac known bacteria, that getting your dog out into the woods, getting your dog to move into a certain environment. So it's not only exercising, but where you exercise, according to researchers, plays a very impactful role on balancing out stress levels in a dog. All of these dogs had access to soil and outdoors and constantly in and out, but more out than in. And there's a lot of research to show that that's actually probably better that dogs spend more time outdoors than they do indoors, the way that how polluted our homes are today. And here's one crazy part, Tom. These dogs, the majority of these long-lived dogs, all slept outside. I was mortified when I heard that information. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to call the SPCA. This is crazy. What do you mean these dogs are not living in your homes? They're sleeping outside. That is absolute bullshit. And the owners were like, no, man, the dogs we don't let the dogs in. And when you look at the data and the research on that, man, maybe it's actually, there's some huge scientific components to why these dogs live so long actually sleeping outside and not sleeping indoor. But that's another discussion for another time.
Well, I think there's so much to unpack there, right? Like you have, to me, like from a behavioral, the more I learn about dogs, the more I realize how much we forget that they're animals, right? Like these dogs are animals. And I tell people, when people bring me these border collies, these Australian shepherds, and these high-class working dogs that are made to be working all day long, and hey, Tom, my dog's chasing the kids. Hey, Tom, my dog's biting people. Hey, Tom, my dog's nipping people. Hey, Tom, my dog has anxiety. I'm like, your dog is supposed to have anxiety because your dog is supposed to be working, right? Like, same thing with me, Rodney. Last night, I'm very particular about my caffeine intake because I'm very sensitive to caffeine. Last night, had too much, came home just, busy. 6:30, 7 o'clock, the kids have to go down to bed. I told my wife, I said, hey, I got to go get a couple miles in because I won't sleep good. And my mind is, and she understood that, thankfully. But it's the same thing, right? We get these dogs that were born to work, born to chase cattle, born to herd things, born to work. And that fulfillment that dogs get can, of course, help them live longer, of course, can help them live happier, healthier lives because they're being fulfilled. They're being satisfied at a primal level. Like their DNA makeup is to do these things. And once they start, it's like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when you're outside and you smell, and I don't know if it's a guy thing or not, but you smell fire, like for me, I'm like, that gets me excited. I'm like, that just sparks something in my nervous system is primal, where I'm like, smoke, fire, security, I don't know what it is, right? It's like that comfy feeling, and you just don't know what it is, right? And so dogs who sleep outside, to the pet owner, especially in the United States, Rodney, like we have this anthropomorphism of not only treating dogs as not animals, but thinking they're not animals, is one of the biggest causes of insecurity, anxiousness, and anxiety that dogs have, is because their owners aren't willing to give them the structure and give them the jobs and outletting that they not only want, but are necessary for their genetic makeup, right? Again, talking about these working line shepherds and even these mixed breeds that have their super dog. They have all these, Great Pyrenees and shepherd and whatever is in them. And that's causing a lot of chaos. And so dogs sleeping outside to me is like, cool. Like, let dogs, like I always say, the more we can let dogs be dogs, kind of closes the circuit at a more organic way. And to your point, like there's also this huge part of me that is so loving and empathetic towards dogs, but the more I really work with dogs and kind of read them and watch them, and they're kind of looking at you like, I'm so bored. Like, I need something to do. Like, I always say, like, the happiest day for a working dog is going out, sunrise, working all day long, coming back, eating whatever scraps they can find, killing a mouse or whatever, right? Picking up the slop that the livestock forgot, taking a nap on the hay, waking up and doing it again. Like, that's when, not all dogs, right? I made this post one time, Rodney, about your dog is likely a savage. And people in the comments were like, I can assure you that my pug sleeping on the couch snoring right now is not actually a savage. And I got to tell you this.
I'm sure that fired up dog moms.
But that's the thing, Rodney, like, I have to be a disruptor of reality, because everybody wants to be the classical dog mom until their dog starts acting like a dog, until their dog starts trying to kill cats, trying to bite kids, trying to bite people when they come over because they're maybe a Rottweiler that doesn't know what to do, but their instincts are saying must protect, right? Like, all these contradicting things. Hey, super protective dog, do what you want, no structure, do as you feel. And then the dog starts scaring the crap out of everyone coming over, and then we yell at them. No bad dogs. It's like, whoa. You gaslit this dog the entire time. I got to tell you this story. So I spent a lot of time at a wolf sanctuary in southern Colorado called Mission Wolf. And a lot of the wolves there at the time, some of them are still alive, but a lot of them have passed, were movie projects. So back in the day, if you will, now everything is AI and CGI and all those things. But they used wolves in the beginning to calculate their movements and do all those things, like the Twilight series. So tons of wolves were at this sanctuary. And I remember I was hanging out, and I spent 4 summers. I would go out every summer and just watch. And I didn't train wolves. I just watched wolves. Watched how they moved, how they ate, how they talked, how they slept, how they howled, how they hunted, everything. I just was fascinated by canine behavior. And to make it even cooler, there were some street dogs there was this one street dog named Abraham. They call him Abe. And he was picked up in Salt Lake City, and he's just a dog. But he was like actual timber wolves would part the sea for this husky to walk through. I mean, he looked like a wolf because he was like a husky, right? Malamute or something. That's why he was there. Like, oh, here's this wolf. He was the most stable, secure dog, which made him the part of the pack that was like everyone says alpha. Like alpha isn't the strongest or the biggest. It's usually the wisest and clearest. Like when shit hits the fan, do you want a manager going, hey, I want you to go here. I want you to call this person. Or do you want somebody running around with their head cut off? So anyway, we're sitting around one of the enclosures. The wolves are pacing as they do. And there was this bird's nest up here. It was like a magpie bird's nest. And they gained money by just letting people come in. It was like an attraction where people come and see, and they say, hey, this is how wolves eat. This is what we feed them. This is how they hunt. These wolves would probably die if they were, let go into the wild. So anyway, there was like a group of family and some schools up there. And I remember the wolves were kind of like pacing because the baby birds were chirping. And this little bird fell right into the enclosure. And I just remember this wolf named Tiger, beautiful timber wolf, bright yellow eyes. And everyone was like, oh, kind of gasped. They were like, oh no, right? Like, and then the wolf just came up, picked up the bird, threw it up in the air, chomped it and killed it, ate it, and alive. And everyone was flabbergasted, Rodney, just blown away. And to me, I'm like, oh, they don't realize, like, these wolves that they have this spiritual connection with, they don't realize these are killers. Like, these are actual animals. And that's really where my career kind of pivoted a little bit, that I was like, I need to start helping dog owners understand what they have so they can help their dogs and advocate for their dogs, right? So anyway, tangent, but I had to tell you that story because it was really a pivotal moment in my career where all these, I don't know what they thought was going to happen. Maybe somebody was going to go in and put the bird back up in the nest, or maybe the wolf would come over and sniff it and lick it like a Disney movie. I'm like, that thing's going to eat that thing alive. And he did. And so it's interesting. So these dogs that you have been following and researching, sleeping outside, what was their diet like? What were they I'd imagine they weren't feeding Purina, not just because Purina is a processed food, but because it seems like these guys are, either bush people or mountain people, and they probably don't have a superstore to go buy packaged dog food, I would imagine.
You're spot on. Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. You don't. It's really interesting when you look at these long-lived animals, the ones that we've found and discovered thus far have all been fed minimally processed foods, right? So you hit the nail on the head. There have been some dogs, Tom, that the owners will use the occasional bag of ultra processed food in these weird situations, like they had to go to the vet or the dog had to stay somewhere, so on and so forth. But the majority of them, everything is minimally processed. Bobby being the great example. In Portugal, when you look at the lifestyle of the Portuguese there, only 10% of that country consume ultra-processed food. 10%, right? There's a lot of their food supply is fresh seafood, fresh fish, or the things that are grown on the farm, in the garden. And they go from there and they boil a lot, which I kind of initially, when I got there and saw some of the dishes, as a North American, you kind of get grossed out, right? Like if somebody's having like a barbecue and like, come over, I'm going to like barbecue chicken or steak, versus, hey, come into my house, I'm going to boil you some chicken, I'm going to boil you a steak. You get grossed out, right? So there's that weird sort of sense that didn't translate for many pet parents when we were trying to explain it. But man, boiling is one of the greatest ways to preserve not only nutrition in food, but at the same time, you're not producing a lot of heterocyclic amines or end byproducts that can actually harm the animal or harm your family member. So these foods were that the Portuguese eat, their dishes are minimally processed in the way that their animals, those that feed their animals from the table, all minimally processed foods, Tom, and a vast, vast diversity of foods, because we get into these kicks nowadays when we're feeding our animals. You find a food, it seems to be working, and you stick to it from birth to death. And that is the probably the worst way that one could ever diversify the microbiome of a dog. And diversity, what is so important about diversity? Well, when you sit with microbiologists and you talk about the longest lived people, let's just say, those supercentenarians, the Hansa tribe, Sardinians, when researchers would travel and longevity scientists would travel and analyze the microbiomes of those long-lived humans, they had a diverse microbiome, 50% more than the average North American. When you looked at the microbiome of these long-lived dogs, Tom, it was unbelievable. We would send the results. So we would collect samples for geneticists. We would collect samples for microbiologists. We wanted to send the samples directly back to the scientists. So hopefully we could translate this for like future dogs. And the microbiome of these long-lived animals who were consuming mainly minimally processed foods, they had microbiomes that like floored the microbiologists. Just diversity is so important. I think that's the biggest thing that we lack today in our own diets and in our pets' diets.
It's a great point. Can you explain to me what can you explain to me what microbiome is?
Yeah. So this is a really, there's a lot of marketing today, and obviously there's a lot of supplements out in the world today. And so when you go out there, you'll see things like probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics. It can be very, very confusing. Your microbiome, according to Dr. Tim Spector. Dr. Tim Spector, for those that might not know, 1% of the most cited scientists in the world. Over 700 research papers put out by this man, arguably the number one microbiologist on planet Earth. We flew to King's College in the United Kingdom to sit with him. He's worked with dogs. He's worked with humans. And he explains your microbiome as your animal's pharmacy or your pharmacy. If you have a problem, Tom, it is worked out and sorted out in your microbiome. That's where, where there's thousands of chemical signals within the body, within the microbiome, communicating with each other for repair. If your heart's not functioning properly, if your eyes aren't functioning properly, if your brain's not functioning properly, where your hormones are produced, where behavior, my gosh, the root of most behavior issues, they usually start in the microbiome. And what typically happens is when it comes back to food and to diversity, there's so many different ways to look at food. So first and foremost, if you have like a food adulteration scale, let's say, how much am I damaging the food that I'm losing the good microbes on the food? Those microbes, let's say, would be your probiotics, these bacteria that you can find on food that you put into your body that diversify in your microbiome and help the communication network within your body. So let's just go with the term probiotics. The prebiotics, Tom, are the foods that you feed the probiotics, all that bacteria in your body. And here's the thing. Scientists has worked it out for humans. Today, the largest citizen science project called the American Gut Project found that Tom and Rodney and Tom's beautiful kid and Tom's wife need to be consuming on average 30 to 40 different plants a week. Now that sounds like a lot, man, right? Because the reality is you go to your supermarket, it's really hard to find 30 to 40 different plants a week. But by plants, scientists are saying those would include vegetables, fruits, seeds, nuts, spices, legumes, and some grains, right? Then when you start to look at it that way, you're like, okay, I can get pretty close there. What about the dog who evolved with man for over arguably anywhere between 15 to 30,000 years? Well, I can tell you when you sit down and you talk to historians, dogs have always consumed man's garbage, and man's garbage were those diversity in foods, right? Like there was no ultra-processed food kibble 30 to 15,000 years ago, right? And people get really upset when you correlate the dog's diet to the wolf's diet because they're like, well, my pug is not a wolf, he's a dog, so why are you making that comparison? Okay, we don't need to make that comparison. Let's just look at the evolution of the dog. He's always been eating what man has eaten. And most of it has been man's garbage. And what's in man's garbage? I can tell you that it was a very diverse pile of foods. So when people go and feed their dogs and they're going out into the world of the food aisles, they historically will find a package of food and then they become dedicated to that package of food. They don't really rotate in and out of anything else. Whether you're feeding ultra-processed food, processed food, or minimally processed foods, people can get stuck in that space and they don't diversify the microbiome. Now, when you don't diversify it, meaning the probiotic, the bacteria that needs the food, which is the prebiotic, when the probiotic eats the prebiotic, he creates what's called the postbiotic, that chemical signal that can repair something that's broken in the body. But if the bacteria isn't there, you can put all the prebiotic you want in the body, you're not going to get the response. And if the bacteria is there and you're not feeding it with diversity, the prebiotics, you kill it off. And now you start to get wonky things that can happen in your animal. One of the biggest things is behavior issues. Multiple studies. I sometimes, like when I get these trainers from around the world that reach out to me, they seem to argue sometimes with people in the medical world pertaining to, well, is there enough science that the gut microbiome affects behavior? That's all we have is science that the gut microbiome affects behavior. And so you can actually affect hormone production from the microbiome, which makes it impossible sometimes for a trainer. Sometimes trainers will reach out to me, they get that dog and it's like, they bang their head against the wall. They've tried everything and it just doesn't seem to work. And sometimes there's such a bad chemical imbalance going on in the GI system that nobody's addressed or no one's even looked at. And that can cause a whole host of issues. So sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent there to address kind of like what the microbiome is. But I believe for a trainer, the microbiome, if 50% of it is psychological, I can assure you that the other giant portion of it is that microbiome, because that can make or break situations sometimes when you're trying to fix a pet. And when you don't know the history, it can make things even more difficult. A great example would be pet owners that want the dog too early. You know how there's that 8-week mark when you get, if you're blessed to go to a good breeder, let's just say, and you get your dog at 8 weeks. Well, there's this argument where people want them earlier, 6 weeks, 5 weeks. You should see the science and the data that's out there that if you strip a dog too early from its mom, the cortisol levels are so off balance for that dog as that dog gets older, that science can show, there was a study that was done that 90% of dogs that are taken too early away from their moms grow up to have severe anxiety. And so that is related to the microbiome, because you need that microbial merger between mom and the puppy for a distinct period of time. And so that's just one small example of the importance of the microbiome.
And so what can people do to help with their dog's microbiome? What can the dog owner right now say, okay, my dog's anxious. I'm not supplementing. I'm not giving my dog probiotics. I take probiotics myself every night and in the morning. What can dog owners do? Would you say, Rodney, that every dog can benefit from some sort of probiotic for the gut?
This is an awesome question. So there was, Tom, for the longest time, when we'd sit down with longevity scientists and microbiologists, for the longest time, we were told to take probiotics every day. And there's a lot of those pet parents that are out there that give probiotics every day. Then a new study was published in Cell that sort of shifted the way that microbiologists started to think after 2018 moving forward on daily consumption of probiotics. Here's a great way that Dr. Mark Hyman, functional medicine doctor, when we sat down with him, he blurred our book. He's an awesome, incredible human MD. But your microbiome, imagine it to be a lot of land. And for Tom and his dog, he wants to make the microbiome as diverse as possible, the most amount of good bacteria possible for longer health, for a longer lifespan, and for better mood. If you keep putting in your microbiome, Tom, or your dog's microbiome, the same bacteria day in and day out. So if I got a jar of probiotics and every day I'm scooping it and I'm putting it into that bowl, human or dog, you're going to put the same strains of bacteria every single day into that microbiome that it takes up all of the land. Then Tom turns around and he eats he starts to eat incredible fermented foods, kimchi, sauerkraut, whatever. Here come a bunch of new subsets of bacteria to come in to diversify Tom or his dog's microbiome, but all the land is taken up because you were putting the same probiotic day in and day out in a dog's diet, knowing that probiotics were good, but not realizing that it took up all the land mass and it didn't allow other things to grow. So I'm not saying that probiotics are bad, but long-term consumption for a dog or cat is probably not the most ideal way to go according to science, because you'll limit the amount of diversity in that microbiome.
So how can people diversify that? So I understand that makes sense. You're kind of beating the same drum there, where it's like you keep giving the probiotics and it's kind of stagnant, right? So is there anything that dog owners can do to diversify it that's reasonable? Okay.
1,000%. So first and foremost, I think the most important thing is to be testing, right? Because we can have these hypothetical, anecdotal conversations, but if we're not testing, you don't really know what's going on in your dog's microbiome. So first and foremost, you want to get a good company to do a microbiome analysis of your dog. Now, here's the good news. These microbiome kits are now part of the medical world. So they're covered actually by pet insurance if you have pet insurance. And 50% of the time you can find them at your clinic if you go visit your veterinarian, and or you can go online and purchase it yourself. The microbiome test may cost you, depending on the country you're in and the currency that you're paying, anywhere, let's say between $100 to $200. That test result will come back, and that's really going to tell you where you need to go in your life, right? If you are having, I keep taking this back to behavior, and I apologize just only because it seems like the theme with my incredible host on the other side pertaining to behavior. So you get your microbiome result back, you take a look at it, and it's going to give you a whole bunch of subsets of bacteria that what's going on in your pup. One type of bacteria, as an example, is called fusobacteria. That is the bacteria responsible for the digestion of protein. How is my dog digesting his protein properly? This is really important type of bacteria because if you want the brain to behave properly, if you want the dog to eat protein, digest amino acids, and have his brain work right, if he's missing that subset of bacteria, you're going to get a really shitty dog. And I'm sorry, I don't mean shitty. There's no bad dogs, but I mean like you're going to get a behavior that comes back at you that you're not going to like because that poor dog's brain is not functioning properly. And so you try to train a dog who can't process amino acids properly and his brain is malfunctioning, it's going to be harder, right? It's not going to be easy in any way. And you as the trainer had no idea that dog was, let's say, missing that subset of bacteria, which is why it's really important that an owner is looking at that. Does he want to address that? Here in Nova Scotia, right above us, Newfoundland, a peer-reviewed paper published out of Springer Nature 2 months ago. I posted it on my page. Those trainers did a study on dogs with bad behavior and found a subset of bacteria called Blottia. And what they found was that dogs that had either aggression or anxiety issues seemed to have elevated levels of Blottia. And what's crazy is I started to get all these DMs from all these trainers sending me screen captures of their microbiome tests. Tom, Blottia was up on I would probably say 80% of those dogs. Now, there's other reasons why you can have behavior issues. I don't want to correlate it entirely to Blottia, but hey, one example of if I'm a trainer, I really want to know what's going on in that microbiome, I have to do a microbiome test first. But first and foremost, before anything, so I know what I'm dealing with, do I have viruses? Do I have harmful bacteria in my dog's microbiome? So as an example, there's something called Escherichia shigella, or the cousin to E. coli. Tom, when you put a dog on antibiotics, and let's not talk about how many dogs have gone through multiple rounds of antibiotics in the United States or globally, worldwide, the number one most prescribed diarrhea medication is metronidazole, which is a low-grade antibiotic. You can get, as let's just say a byproduct of using antibiotics, according to microbiologist, PhD microbiologist Dr. Holly Gantz, your dog can develop high levels of E. coli, Escherichia shigella. That E. coli produces something called Shiga toxins. Those Shiga toxins will cloudy that brain up so bad in that poor dog just as a side effect to the round of antibiotics he was prescribed. And then my dog is now freaking out. So I send my dog to Tom. And that dog's got a belly full of E. coli. And here's Tom with his awesome energy and his awesome toolbox to repair that dog. But without a microbiome test, you had no idea that dog has a belly full of E. coli, which is making inflaming his brain and making it very hard to communicate with that dog. And or you got that dog to finally be perfect, but then you send it back home to the owner, back into that inflamed environment, and then it becomes 10 times worse. So the first thing that you want to do, first and foremost, is a microbiome test, Tom. Did that make sense? Like, that's how critical that is. That is like the number one tool, I would say, for any veterinarian, any pet owner, any trainer. You really want to know what's going on in that gut because remember, that's where a lot of your hormones are manufactured, right? Serotonin, cortisol, dopamine, it's down there. And if the gut-brain axis, and if the gut is damaged, so is the brain.
That's so powerful. And how can people do it? So people are listening, they go, hey, this sounds great. I want to test. What are some companies that do the good testing that you trust?
Yeah. So I know there's a couple that have reached out to me thus far, and I work for no company. I don't sell any products, nothing. I'm pretty PC, and as I try to stay as a clear Canadian as possible so it doesn't convolute the information that I share. One company that I'm familiar with, because this is the company that we use, this is arguably the number one microbiology lab in the US, would be Animal Biome. And so I know that Animal Biome offer testing kits there for pet parents, and they're usually sold at veterinary clinics, or you can buy them online. And they can be expensive for those that are young, because $100 to $200 is a lot of money. But I would argue that this is just as important as blood work, getting blood work, checking out what's under the hood of a dog, especially if you adopt a shelter dog, or like you said, those pot cake dogs that you get from down south, or dogs that can come up, like in Nova Scotia, we get a lot of beautiful dogs that come up from Texas. You don't know the previous history of that dog before that dog comes in. And normally what happens in a lot of these beautiful shelters, and if you are in a shelter listening to this is really important. They will, because they're such incredible people, they send the dogs up or to the, to either a neighboring shelter where the dog's going to be adopted or to the adopter. They usually give the dog, Tom, antibiotics as a just in case before sending the dog up. Now they unknowingly created what's called dysbiosis. So a good gut, eubiotic gut, a bad gut, a dysbiotic gut. When you damage the gut and then you send the dog to, let's say, Tom, who's about to adopt the dog, you're now sending that dog up with a cascade of issues. Allergy-like symptoms, behavior issues, chronic inflammation, nutrition malabsorption. So like first poop is good, second poop is runny. Dog seems to have a lot of diarrhea. Some people be like, the dog's stressed out. He's in a new environment. Yes, some of the time. But most of the time it's because they've unknowingly, accidentally damaged the microbiome. Dog gets into the new family, bites the shit out of somebody in the house, or attacks another dog, or attacks the cat. Owner gets mad at the shelter because they're like, hey, you assessed that as a good dog and you sent that dog up to me. I got to call Tom now. Tom, please come fix my dog. Somebody sent me a bad dog. Tom comes in, let's say with his incredible work, fixes the dog, gets it back to the pet parents. And I don't want to keep saying Tom is in referring to you that you would do this. I'm just using this as a terrible example. No. But you don't know. So you give it back. So you with your magic powers, you fix this incredible animal and then you send it back to the pet parent. Pet parent gets it, but there's still gut dysbiosis there. Hormones still aren't firing properly. Dog seems to be good for the first couple months, but then that rewiring, because of that chronic inflammation in the brain, that dog can't retain that information, and the dog starts to revert again, and then the owner then starts to have a whole host of issues. So this is what's really critical about testing. So animalbiome.com, you get a test kit, you analyze the dog's microbiome, and it's going to tell you so many things. Can your dog digest protein? Can your dog digest simple carbohydrates? Tom, for the majority, so I would like to think that all the hard work that me, my colleagues, veterinarians, PhDs, all of the information that we've been sharing over the last 20 years about bettering your nutrition. In other words, in human nutrition, you and I, it's pretty straightforward. Your human nutrition science will say to you, Tom, eat as much minimally processed food as possible and avoid as much ultra-processed food as possible. That doesn't seem crazy, right? No. Seems pretty logical. Her mother and her mother would have told her that. Avoid junk food, eat good food, right? However, in animal nutrition science, it's upside down. Now, arguably, you could say that is it because the ultra-processed food industry got their fingers into the medical books. But in the animal nutrition science world, it's feed your dog or your cat as much ultra-processed food as possible because it's science-backed, it's science, and avoid minimally processed foods because like carrots could give your dog diarrhea. It's completely upside down, right? So we've spent 20 years trying to flip it back to where it actually should be. So what happens is, and where I went off on this tangent, was that when I started 20 years ago, arguably 94% of pet owners were feeding ultra-processed food in the way of, let's say, dry extruded kibble. Today, current research shows it's down to 61%. So it took 20 years, but more and more pet parents like Tom are asking better questions. Why is it that I'm feeding ultra processed food? Why wouldn't I be feeding minimally processed food to my dog? It doesn't make sense. When you do an animal biome test, it can actually test to see if your dog, or a microbiome test, I should say, Animal Biome, the company, it'll show that if that dog can process, even break down ultra processed food. So 61% of dogs are potentially eating ultra processed food, missing a bacteria, let's say called Provotella. Provotella is the bacteria responsible for digesting simple carbohydrates. Guess what? If the dog doesn't have it because it was damaged, especially if you got a shelter dog that was given antibiotics and the Provotella is gone, now it creates chronic inflammation in the body, symptoms like IBD, and it's going to inflame the brain. And so the owner now is jumping back and forth, not realizing that the diet is what's actually inflaming the brain because the dog was missing that subset of bacteria. I could go on forever.
No, I love it. It's really important. So people can go to I'll put it in the show notes too. Animalbiome.com is one, but you guys have the internet. Go to ChatGPT, go to Google, put in animal biome test. If you're because we have listeners all over the world, so maybe this one isn't available. So check your dog's biome, and essentially, what would it be like? It would just be a stool sample you send in, or
maybe a stool sample. Yeah, you'll get. So they'll send you you're a microbiologist for the day. They'll send you a little pair of gloves, a little tiny Q-tip with a test tube. You literally dip it into the stool sample. You put it in the test tube and you mail it back to the microbiologist, or you purchase it from your vet clinic. You do it. You take it back to your clinic. They send it off. Depending on how you send it to them, you get your results within 72 hours. You'll have them emailed. So they'll either be emailed back to your veterinarian who can break it down for you. Yeah, you can within 6 business days, you can probably get this back. Your veterinarian can help you decipher it. You can call the company themselves. They'll help you break it down. And more trainers that I talk to today, they're literally spending so much time in the microbiology world that they have taken courses and familiarized themselves with what they're looking at when they look at that microbiome, Tom. But in my brain, that would be the number one thing. Put longevity to the side. If you're in terms of behavior, if you're not doing that as a trainer, I feel like it's making your life a lot harder, because it's like trying to fix a car but not looking under the hood. So you don't know what the heck is going on under the hood. So it could make your life an absolute disaster. You could have a dog with C. diff. You could have a dog with Clostridium perfringens. These are types of gnarly viruses and bacteria that grow in the microbiome unknowingly. Then somebody gives you this dog with this ultra inflamed brain. And it's so difficult to try to rewire this dog's head because he's so inflamed. You may get to it because of your incredible skill, but his brain is still inflamed. No one got to address that, but how easy we can do it today through microbiology.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for that. I got to ask you about allergies. How familiar are you with dog allergies? Because I got a good one for you. Okay. Same. Same for me. So let me tell you, I have a Borbal. He's intact. He's about a year and a half. And I've been battling with allergies for almost a year now. And I've been feeding him different proteins. I've been feeding him different companies. So here's the deal: is he gets these. Basically, if you look, for those of you who don't know what a Borbal looks like, think of a boxer, really short, coarse, guard hair, no insulator coat, just like a Vizsla boxer type coat. And he gets these little, in the beginning it started off, Rodney, as these little almost ringworm looking spots on his belly, right, where he's bald and naked. These little spots. And slowly but surely, these spots the rings got bigger, they got more, and then they started getting red crust around them. And then I was like, okay. And so I waited a little bit, and then it got to a point where it was going up to his sides, his flanks, his ribs, and it started actually taking that those little rings where it was on his underbelly, on his sides, and then all of his hair started coming off in those areas. So it looked like he was like polka dots, right? And I'm like, and he's itchy, and I'm thinking, okay, this isn't good. And so I've been struggling with this now for quite a long time. And he's on a raw diet, but we have switched him from chicken and rice. We have switched proteins from chicken to beef to duck. We don't. I've been to a dermatologist. I've been to 4 different veterinarians at general GPs. They've tested it. They've scraped it. They declined doing a blood panel for it because they said it would, I believe the terminology was it would come back kind of a false negative, kind of like human allergy test. And so what is your experience with allergies? I know it can certainly be environmental, and I want to give you a little bit more context. So the first veterinarian, because it was all underbelly first, had said, well, if it didn't happen when he was a puppy, and he's been on the same food, and it's starting on his underbelly in the spring and in summer, it could be allergens to weeds, plants, potential pesticides or fertilization. Even if it's not on my yard, it could be in other people's yard. And so now this last round of outbreak is now the opposite. So now it's just on his side and not on his belly. And so I've been posting about it, and the dermatologist had she was great, by the way, and I wish she would come on the podcast, but she doesn't want to, and I don't blame her if you're not,
I can hook you up with some pretty remarkable PhD. Listen, this is my world, so I've been blessed to be able to sit down with some incredible board certified like dermatologists, veterinary oncologists. I got you. So after this podcast, I'll
Please. So anyway, so here we are now, and I don't know what to do because he's itchy, he's uncomfortable. It's inconsistent. So sometimes his ears will get yucky and infected, and then they won't. And I give him. I can't remember the name of it, but it's this last veterinarian appointment was probably the most educational. They tested for ringworm. It wasn't ringworm because that's what it looks like. Looks like ringworm. They gave him something that basically decreases the allergy reaction. And
Apoquel? Apoquel?
It's the one that has a bunch of studies saying that it responds really poorly with a recently vaccinated dog. And I can't remember the name of it. I want to say it starts...
Cytopoint? Is it injection or is it a pill?
No, it's a pill. It's a pill.
Cytopoint, maybe? Excuse me, Apoquel, maybe?
I can't remember the name of it.
It basically calms a hyperactive immune system down?
It suppresses and stops the reaction. I'll get it. I'm going to get it for you in a second. I'm going to have my wife grab it. But what she said is basically, and correct me and that's why I love doing these podcasts, because I'm a trainer, not anything else. And so I think she said basically what's happening is he's getting a low grade reaction to an allergen, and then what's happening is as he scratches it and rubs it and it's agitated, it's then turning into dermatitis, I think is what she said, which then it spreads and gets worse. And he's been on and off, Rodney, like this for over a year. And I am totally open to switching to Purina that I get in a gas station if it helps if it helps his
No, I get it.
skin.
We'd do anything. Yeah, I'd feed my dog paper if it's going to fix the problem. So I definitely understand where you're going from there. Do you know, so first and foremost, obviously, we're 2 pet parents sharing information back and forth. So we're both not veterinarians, and I'm sure if a vet's listening to this, they probably punch us both in the face. But let me say this, as a 2.0 pet parent, and Tom being a 2.0 pet parent, we are 2 pet parents having a discussion And I've been in a lot of discussions with a lot of veterinarians over the last 20 years. So would give you my take on this would be the take on from what veterinarians have told me during my podcasts and what a 2.0 pet parent would do. So we're not going to diagnose, we're not going to do any of that, but I would show you the path that I would go on that I believe is going to help you immensely and would help another pet parent in the same type of situation. So first of all, Tom, getting the history is really important too, right? So here's a quick example. If I had a C-section puppy, that is going to cause a whole host of issues with that puppy growing up, according to science. It's the same thing with a human. Here in Canada, we did a study on the sickest Canadians. You know that friend that you have that you always call, Tom, that's always sick, or like in school that was always sick, and you're like, God, man, why are you always so damn sick? Like, drink some orange juice or something. So, right? Kids, right? So historically, it's the subsets of bacteria that mom transfers from her microbiome, so from her vaginal fluid, that get onto the baby, that set the baby up for the course of their life. And so if mom's microbiome is damaged, guess who else microbiome is going to be damaged, right? So C-section baby is important because it means they didn't come out normally, so they didn't get the vaginal fluid that's going to set them up. We know that, to go back to that study, the sickest Canadians, FYI, were those that were born through a C-section. They had autoimmune issues as they got older. So already the microbiome is not firing properly because the baby didn't come out normal. In fact, you're seeing now more and more in science, they'll take actually mom's vaginal fluid in some countries and jam it in the baby's ear just to get that bacteria back into the baby. You actually transferring mom's vaginal fluid to a baby born by C-section, according to it's an article published in the New Scientist, I can't remember who did the study, shows that a baby's development will be at 6 months more advanced by transferring vaginal fluid. So C-section puppies could be no different. That's one. Two, me, you, the dog, the cat, we're all born technically with what's called dysbiosis, right? And this is very layman, so I apologize for the microbiologists that are listening, but we're just trying to make this easy for the pet parent listening. Mom's breast milk has what's called colostrum that's inside of it. Colostrum historically goes in, it seals the microbiome up for you, right? So that's why it's really important that these dogs are like whelping properly. Sometimes when you get a puppy that didn't whelp properly, you get a dog that comes home with dysbiosis. So already another type of problem, and I'll allude to why this is the issue. Lastly, Giardia, which is like one of the biggest problems right now in the United States. If you look at the Dog Aging Project, who released a list of the top 10 diseases, Giardia falls in there. Sometimes the treatment has to be antibiotics, or maybe a young dog that got Lyme that's on 30 days of antibiotics, the microbiome's already damaged. So the history of your pup, do you know, when you got that dog, was it at 8 weeks? Was it a C-section baby, or did you just adopt this beautiful pup? How did it come into your life? So step one. Okay, so somebody who's listening, we just gave them some ideas on some things that you may want to think about pertaining to maybe why you're seeing an overactive immune system. All right. So then the puppy comes into your life at 8 weeks. So the next thing a 2.0 pet parent is going to ask Tom is, when did you first see your problem?
Sorry, Rodney, I just got a special delivery. Okay, so this is Zenarella. Zenerelia. And it has worked, but, and from my knowledge, I'm going to look it up so we can.
I'm trying to Google it while we're talking. Hopefully we can.
Yeah, I'll chat it really quick and see what my.
Oh, okay. That is the, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, because here in Canada, you're going to have different brand names.
Right.
I believe that is the cousin to Apoquel.
Okay. And this is 15 milligrams. And this, and one of the things that the vet said, she goes, you're going to read a bunch of research about it causing issues with recently vaccinated dogs, but here's what it is. It's a new drug that essentially the follow-up to Apoquel, yes, designed for canine allergic dermatitis and atopic dermatitis. So that's what it is. And that had worked. I don't know, Rodney, what it's doing to his immune system. I don't know what it's doing to his liver. all I know is I'm trying to weigh out this battle of allergies, immune suppression, liver damage potentially. I don't know. So can you explain to me what this is doing, why it works?
So as two pet parents discussing this, because we're just two lugheads having this conversation. We're not,
right.
So in terms, we don't work for the pharmaceutical companies or nothing.
Armchair experts, if you will.
Right. In a very layman explanation, it's basically like an autoimmune suppressant. So my dog is having a hyperactive immune system, right? So imagine your immune system's a scale. It's either low, or it's high. And so basically when you go on Apoquel, as like these autoimmune suppressants, hypothetically, in layman terms, it's like turning the immune system off. So rather than the dog freaking out, it gives the dog a sense of relief in terms of itching and so on and so forth. So it says to the immune system, go to sleep, I got this. Very layman way of explaining it. Now, Apoquel, I know that the FDA made them put on the side of the box that there's also the risk of, especially if you have a dog with cancer, you may want to reconsider putting a dog on an autoimmune suppressant. I mean, think about it, right? An immune suppressant, because your immune system, which the good Lord gave you, is your best defense mechanism in warding off issues. When you turn it off, you hypothetically open open up yourself to a whole bunch of other issues that could potentially happen, right? So it says on the side of the box, and I know the FDA got them put on there, look for the word neoplasia, which means cancer. There was also a study that came out, I believe, and don't quote me on this, that there was a subset of dogs that developed lymphoma on an overuse of these type of drugs. These type of medications, in my opinion, as a pet parent, are a short-term fix for a long-term type of problem you have, because they're not fixing your problem at all. They're just giving your poor dog a sense of relief, and no dog deserves to be in pain. Let me just say that first and foremost. So as a pet parent working with my veterinarian, if they were to put me on this drug, this would just be a short-term answer till I figured out what the heck was going on, and I'd want to address it immediately rather than being on these type of immunosuppressants long-term, because there's just science showing that might not be the greatest idea. Now, I do know that there's some animals that don't have a choice, or you could be geographically in a certain location. But to address you, Tom, this is just, you got a short-term fix in your hands. It's by no means going to stop or address your problem. It's just going to shut off a hyperactive immune system. Okay.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Sorry, Rodney. I just want to interrupt to say this to give you context. My dog's skin was so irritated that it actually was raised off his belly. It was so inflamed. It looked like one big. It was bright red, and almost it was so inflamed. So that's why, just to give you context, Rodney, the vet, the vet had prescribed this because he was in so much discomfort because on his skin. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it was so.
I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, so I know exactly what you're saying.
It was bad.
Here's how two pet parents would have this conversation. You and I. Working with your veterinarian, obviously. And I'm going to hook you up with a veterinarian immediately after this podcast. That's going to be magic for you. She's just been incredible for so many people. Okay. So just in short, because I don't want to take up the entire podcast discussing this. When was the first sign that your dog had a problem? So you got him at 8 weeks. Was it problematic right from birth, or did the problem develop?
Nope, it wasn't. It was probably 8 months, 9 months is when the first little ring started. When the first little nodule.
When during that 8-month period, if you look at the month before that, was there anything that potentially could have assaulted the microbiome? Did you have maybe an ear infection where you had to go on, let's say, multiple rounds of antibiotics? Maybe could the dog have come in contact with a genotoxin, meaning like glyphosate, or a treated lawn, a lawn chemically? Maybe your dog walked outside, you didn't, but your neighbor, because there's a 50-foot drag, lawn chemical may have come over. That's these genotoxins that we know in science today. New paper published in Comparative Oncology shows that these environmental chemical pollutants can damage the genes of your dog and also the microbiome. So could the dog, I guess my question would be at the 8-month mark, come in contact with something that potentially disrupted or damaged his microbiome?
Yes.
Okay. So right there is your first question with your vet. Dr. Jones, let's pretend that's he or she's name. We need to test the microbiome because I need to know if my dog's got dysbiosis. Why? Science will show you that anything that's pertaining to the skin, all right, especially when you're dealing with like crusts and nodules and so on and so forth, obviously working with your vet, when you have a disrupted gut, you have a disrupted skin microbiome. A healthy gut means I have a lot of microbial diversity on my skin. This is by no means my take. This is published research, right? So you can just look in the Journal of Immunity and you can see dogs suffering with inflammation, atopic dermatitis, which means skin issues. If my dog's gut is damaged, science says that he will get low microbial diversity on his skin. With humans, you can get symptoms like eczema, people that flare up and so on and so forth. So when the gut is disrupted and damaged, so is the skin of the microbiome, which means that's why you can start to get flare-ups and so on and so forth. You'll go running to the dermatologist. Sometimes they'll like shave the dog. You'll see like where they kind of poke them with like different types of allergens and they can inflame. You can do allergy tests. They're going to come back and say, hey, you got to put your dog in a bubble because he's allergic to grass, trees, pollen. And they'll give you a whole list of proteins that you're allergic to. So according to microbiologists, once the gut microbiome is that layer, your gut wall, they say that's a cell thick, is damaged, and now your microvilli are exposed in terms of indoor air particulate matter or food allergen or grass allergen, anything that leaks through that microvilli and gets into your immune system, it's going to cause chaos for Tom. It could be something as simple as feeding your raw food and all of a sudden a meat protein got through that microvilli and got into your immune system. It could be a grass, it could be gluten, it could be any type of environmental toxin, and it's going to trigger a reaction in your dog. And then you're going to go running for those pills and you could be like, what the hell happened today? All of a sudden he just got a quick flare up, right? When your microbiome is disrupted, you can get a whole host of symptoms according to science. So we just talked about the skin microbiome. So you can get dogs, according to the veterinarians we've interviewed, you can get ear infections. So you can get the occasional ear infection that can happen because that's a damp, warm area for bacteria. You can get paw infections, or you can get paw problems where the dog will start biting at their paws because damp area full of bacteria. You can get butt issues. So you can start getting scooting and anal gland problems because the microbiome has been disrupted. You can have areas and flare-ups on the skin where the skin biome is damaged, and then the dog lays down and comes in contact with either some particulate matter on the ground, which adheres to the belly, or if the dog lays on his side, adheres to the sides, and then you're going to get a reaction. When you're working with your, let's say, integrative veterinarian, the first thing that they're going to do with Tom is they're going to say, let's look at the microbiome and look under the hood and see what the heck, why you're getting these autoimmune type responses. Autoimmune, basically in layman terms, we don't know what the problem is, Tom, but we can give you something to address the symptom, like the drugs in your hand, but it doesn't fix your problem, right? And normally, if your gut microbiome is disrupted or your pup's microbiome is damaged, because as we tried to figure out at the 8-month mark when you got your first reaction, which could have disrupted the microbiome, if you don't seal the microbiome, and then you don't turn around and repair the microbiome, working with your veterinarian and microbiologists, you will never address the issue. It won't matter if you could switch every protein type in the world that you want. Here's what we do know in science. Dr. Anna Hjelm-Björkman and her team in Finland, where we flew and interviewed them, did a comparison with dogs with skin allergies, bull terriers. And half the panel they fed ultra-processed food to, which was dry extruded kibble. And the other half of the panel, Tom, they fed them minimally processed food in the ways of raw food. When the study results came out, it showed that the dogs that had consumed the raw food, the minimally processed food, they showed a better gene expression in terms of like antioxidant production and anti-inflammatory effects on the skin. So and most people that are listening to this podcast that had an animal with an issue and they switched over to a minimally processed food diet, and right off the bat, they saw a 30% improvement. Hey, my dog is doing way better than he did on ultra-processed food, but it doesn't get to 100% for Tom. It just gets him like 30% better. That's because his gut is either still damaged and or there's subsets of bacteria that Tom's dog is missing to repair itself. Remember we talked earlier, the prebiotic, the food for the probiotic, it creates the postbiotic. Well, Tom can be feeding the best foods, the prebiotics, but there's no bacteria down there. There's no one knocking at the door to create the postbiotic for you. And now you're doing this vicious circle because you've damaged God-given bacteria. Remember we were talking about vaginal fluid, which would then open up Tom and his veterinarian to look into what's called a fecal microbiome transplant, taking the healthy microbiota of a healthy dog and repairing Tom's damaged microbiome in his dog. And then all of a sudden you start to see incredible repairs. Fecal microbiome transplants are used in everything today, Tom. In human research, they're used in oncology. We've interviewed 3 of the 4, and I believe there's only 4 in the United States of America, board-certified veterinary integrative oncologists. All of them will do an FMT, a fecal microbiome transplant, repairing a cancerous-looking microbiome in oncology. You're trying to reset the microbiome. Today, fecal microbiomes are used for multiple sclerosis. They're used for ALS. They're used for Parkinson's. Like, there is nothing where new research in fecal microbiome transplants aren't being used, and microbiology is emerging. So we don't dominate the entire podcast with the issue, and we can definitely talk more about this off air. You want to work with your veterinarian on repairing the microbiome, because that's the first step to repairing the skin microbiome. Do you know what I mean? And if you don't seal the gut up, you're just going to be in this vicious circular cycle of problems. Have you ever done an animal a microbiome test?
Not myself. So my son had really bad eczema. My second son. He just turned a year old yesterday. And so when he was probably 3 months up until 8 months-ish, he had severe eczema. And I'm talking similar to my dog, neck to pelvic area, red, braille, inflamed, painful, sensitive skin. I mean, looked like he had chicken pox gritted right down this little baby, right? Even at three months. So my experience with gut biome started with him because I went to the internet because, you remind me, and I hope that you don't take offense to this, Rodney, but you kind of remind me of Gary Brecka of D.O.G.S. I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Brecka, but he says this all the time. I'm not a doctor. I'm not this. I just do a lot of research. And it's interesting in the spectrum if you have the Gary Breckas and then you have the Andrew Hubermans, which I actually just ran into Andrew Huberman 2 weeks ago in Aspen, which was awesome. But what happens with the gut biome test with my son, they said the same thing because I was on the internet and I was like, what do I do? And everyone said the same thing. Check the gut. You can do all of the topicals you want. You can put all this stuff on. But like the bottle of pills in my hand, it's not going to fix the problem. But at this point, but my son can't sleep because he's so uncomfortable, right? So it's this battle of what battle are we going to pick here? And so anyway, we did a gut biome test with him, and the doctor had called us this follow-up and said, your son's we did it at like 7 months, and they said that your son's biome was acting as a 4-month-old child. So it wasn't doing
slow in development.
Exactly. And so that's why it couldn't keep up, and it couldn't process, and it couldn't fight, and it couldn't produce all of the things needed. And we found this beautiful, lovely dermatology center 3 hours from us, closer to New York City, that had helped us, and it cleared up in 2 days, and it hasn't come back. And so anyway, sorry on the tangent, but we've done it for my son, so I'm educated on it to that extent, but I have not done it for myself, and I am 100% going to do it for my dogs. Evan Doggart had come on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. He said I
love that guy.
Yeah, he had
fellow
spoken.
Nova Scotian. Shout out to Evan.
That's right, you Canadian boys. So So he had said he had talked about on the podcast that was uploaded last week about this. That comes in a capsule, right? That you're talking about this.
So yeah, so there's two ways to do it. So the ideal way, obviously, Tom, with your veterinarian, is it through an enema. It's how they would do it in human science, right? So it just goes right up from behind, right into the large intestine. Now, you're trying to localize it in that area.
Would you say that most veterinarians would? Because here's my thing: is I would just think that I don't know. I just don't know if like Banfield or another GP is going to have this type of
this at their disposal. So this is a very good question, right? Because it's almost like if you would, probably the best bet would be to contact Animal Biome and see what clinics they're in that are close to you, first and foremost, that are going to help. A standard enema, like here in my hometown, my local vet will do an enema. You can do the capsules. And what can typically happen with like fecal microbiome transplants, Tom, we have a lot of science, because I know people say, well, it's in its infancy. No, we've got a lot of peer-reviewed data. In fact, I just posted a recent study showing dogs with behavior issues, when they were giving an FMT, a fecal microbiome transplant, it improved those behavior issues, because all of a sudden the gut-brain axis now is improved. Wow. You can watch anxiety literally shift in an animal. And I think I just mentioned to you earlier, in Newfoundland here, in the Maritimes, by Nova Scotia, those scientists were able to identify Blottia, a bacteria that created sort of like anxiety and unwanted behaviors in dogs. And when you regulated that, there was improvement. So fecal microbiome transplants are an incredible starting point to saying, hey, let's put the gut bacteria back and let's try to get to see what type of improvement we see. And with some people, Tom, it's instant. If they do it through an enema, they see a 360 in their dog within the first 72 hours. It's unbelievable. For some dogs, though, they don't get the desired effect because there can be what's called permanent gut damage to that gut. There's some studies out there that show dogs and cats that are on antibiotics for 6 weeks or longer, Tom, you can create what's called permanent gut damage to those species of bacteria. You turn around, you do a fecal microbiome transplant, the dog seems absolutely fantastic, whether you're dealing with allergies, dogs with chronic diarrhea, dogs with behavior issues, dogs with cancer, dogs with some sort of disease where your starting point is like, okay, let's repair the microbiome, working with your veterinarian. If you have permanent damage in that microbiome, then you and your vet, along with the microbiologist, have to start talking about something called therapeutic dosing, where you could buy the capsules and then you would give, like, as an example, like 1 capsule a week to your dog, and you watch it, it manages your dog. Those that do fecal microbiome transplants, you see those results pretty quick. You start to see within a week, oh man, wow, then when if you're doing capsules, like 2nd week, 3rd week, 4th week, it's not something that you're just sitting around waiting for. And historically and normally, these are usually one-time treatments. It's not like you're constantly doing these unless, let's say, you have permanent damage. So for you, I think what would be fascinating, and a podcast in the future, would be once you get your microbiome results, it's going to be a great discussion of what's going on down there. And some people will actually rush to do the FMT before doing the test, which I would not recommend, because if you've got a belly full of like harmful viruses and you try an FMT, you're going to struggle to see results because the environment wasn't right. Imagine planting seeds in a garden and your soil is full of gasoline. If you don't transfer that soil out first and put good soil in there, then you try to plant those seeds, you're not going to get the results that you're looking for.
So there is a chance, like if somebody is dealing like me with this consistent allergen to your dog, that it's not the food, it's the gut biome.
It's the gut. I would bet, from the sounds of it, I would be shocked. I would be shocked if your microbiome's not damaged from the sounds of what you're saying. There's a lot of factors pertaining to skin issues, right? I am by no means an expert in this. I'm sharing information from we're in over 400 podcasts now with some of the world's top veterinarians and researchers. So this is just information shared on by me in the passion and the love of citizen science. Some of the problems that can happen today, especially pertaining to the skin, is it environmental? Right? Which is another factor, because there's something in your house called indoor air particulate matter. this stuff is so small, it's smaller than a white blood cell. So if you have a Dyson, or you have an indoor air purification system, there's usually a monitor on there that's monitoring things that are 10 microns down to 2.5 microns. As an example, benzene. If I'm in a newly painted home, or I have a facility that I just painted, or I'm using caulking, or if I'm using some sort of adhesive or glue, or if I'm using cleaners in my household, or if I'm using air fresheners in my household, this particulate matter that you can't see will actually adhere to your dog's fur. It'll bypass the fur and it'll get in through the skin, and then it gets into the muscle. And then epigenetically, according to researchers, it can actually almost, and in layman terms, transfer the muscle to the point that your body doesn't recognize it, and then your immune system attacks it, which is why your dog all of a sudden can just swell up for no reason, or start to develop hives for no reason, because he's been bombarded by indoor air particulate matter. We interviewed a few scientists that believe only 90% of the planet right now, only 10% of the planet has clean air. 90% of the planet has polluted air. So if your environment around your dog is not right as well, this will wreak havoc not only on your dog, but on yourself. The Dog Aging Project is now working with scientists where they've created silicone tags that you can put on your dog and have them walk around the house for a few days, and you send it off to the lab. It will show you all of the things that are adhering to your dog that are creating chaos on that skin and inflaming that skin. So it's a multifactorial type of problem, but a problem that can be figured out if you're working with the right people and people that have you on the right path of trying to address what is causing this. Is it the external environment outside my dog? Is it this particulate matter that's adhering to my dog's fur? Is it the non-stick cookware that I'm using at my home that I'm frying with that's releasing acrolein into the air? Is it my couches that are sprayed with fire retardants because the insurance company doesn't want my couch to go on fire? And the increase in hyperthyroidism in cats and dogs because they lay on these couches naked. Typically we don't, and they're coming in contact with the flame retardant chemicals that's inflaming my dog's skin. Is it the mothballs I'm using in my closet? Is it the cigarette smoke and the benzene that I'm releasing into the air? Is it the cleaning products that I'm putting in and around my house? Is it the plugins, as I had mentioned earlier, to make my house smell great? Those things are releasing, Tom, what are called volatile organic compounds, particles that go into the air that you and I smell that smell great. But what goes up, my friend, must come down. And when it comes down, your dog and cat are Swiffers, and they will sweep it up. And let me tell you, the Environmental Working Group did a study on dogs and found, I believe, on these stats, don't quote me, 40 out of 78 industrial cleaners in the urine of dogs and cats, because they're just picking everything up throughout the house, which is wreaking havoc on their immune system.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a problem too, because you have... What ends up happening is you have these dogs that, like, so my wife is part of the thing that I love about podcasting is you get to educate yourself on the non-traditional markets, right? So the traditional markets would be, you watch anything on Hulu or on your original programming, you're going to get Febreze ads, and you're going to get Burger King ads, and you're going to get all the big buck stuff. They're spending millions of dollars in marketing. They're spending millions. I mean, I think United States and New Zealand are the only two countries in the world that can advertise pharmaceutical drugs, and you've seen it. Maybe you haven't. I don't know, living in Canada.
Well, in Canada, but we watch a lot of U.S. programming, so I see a lot of it.
It's insane. It's insane. What you end up seeing is like, you see, hey, this could help you become less anxious, but also you could be suicidal, and you could there's a funny Jeff Foxworthy bit way back in the day he did, anal leakage, he said. It's so funny. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, why don't you just like go for a run and maybe eat cleaner foods? But one of the things that my wife and I have been learning that you can't unsee is the cleaning products that we put into, like the Tides, the Gains, even the fabric softeners, the dishwasher pods, your cleaning solution. All of these things have so much bad stuff in them. It would blow your mind. My wife my wife listened to a podcast on the Skinny Confidential called, I can't remember, but it was the owner of Birch Basics, which is a healthier, cleaner way to clean your home, especially when you have kids, their immune systems, and of course dogs. Like, I would just urge people out there, and I know you and I aren't specialists on cleaning solutions, but I know that you know a lot more than I do. But one of the things that we've switched to is all natural stuff like Molly Suds, which is a clean detergent to wash your clothes in. We've switched to cleaner dishwasher pods. We've switched to clean candles. We've switched all these things because
So
once
smart.
you know that these cleaning solution, like anything that you can go to the gas station and buy is probably not good. Like anything that's mass produced, that's super cheap and super inexpensive and super flashy, it's probably not that great for you. And we have learned over the years, like the tremendous amount of toxins that are in, like I had this one client and her dog was a golden retriever, super neurotic. And I'm not exaggerating, Rodney, like I'm not at all. This dog's home had literally a plug-in, a Glade plug-in or a Bath and Body Works plug-in on every, I'm not exaggerating, every single outlet. Then, and I'm not exaggerating, then they had about 6 different candles on one floor of the house. And these are Bath and Body Works candles, which are infused with toxins and chemicals and artificial scents, which is not good for you. And here's the thing is, during the time of the training, I was just focused on the dog and figuring out what's going on with the relationship. Now that I've learned about how these artificial scents and chemicals can affect you and affect your neurological system, it can affect your digestive system, it can affect how you feel, your regulation system. Now I'm thinking, this poor dog, because of course, as you know, and people who are listening know, like dogs' senses are much greater than ours, right? Like you said earlier, dogs can detect stress through sweat glands. This dog is probably so messed up from all of these chemicals and these it was hard for me to be in there. And this was prior to me learning about, here's the thing, and this is just an eye opener for everybody who's listening to this, is now that we're off all those things, I can't even get into a vehicle where somebody has like the fake little like tree or the Febreze things. I can't. It kills me. And but prior to that, because I was so desensitized, I was like, oh, this smells good, or this candle smells good. Now, if there's artificial scents, it bothers me. Like it really, like I get a headache pretty quickly, and I can't be in the room. And so, how much research have you seen, and what do you know about what these heavy hitters, right? These sprays, the Febrezes, and these are all, just for the record, these are all things that I used my entire life until I recently educated myself on. And for those of you who are listening, you can go to the Skinny Confidential podcast and listen to the Birch Basics founder, who explains all these things. She started this company, from what I believe, as a mother who wanted better, cleaner ingredients for her kids to grow up into, because it affects the way that they think, it affects their development, it affects their emotional state, it affects everything. And we could get into all of the red dyes and all of those things, but I suggest just go listening to that. But for dogs anyway, Rodney, can you just go through what you know about that?
Yeah, and this, this is kind of where I submerge myself into the research. You just said something earlier that would make a great analogy. So you were talking about the pine scents. You know, you're saying, I go into these rooms with these scents and these chemicals that you're smelling. The terms are called VOCs, volatile organic compounds, right? Things that are launched into the air that smell fantastic to you, that eventually come down to the ground. When you said something, you said, I get headaches and it's really like difficult to talk to me and I got to get out of the room. Imagine what it's like to be a dog who spends day in and day out in the house more than you. Dogs and cats arguably spend more time in our homes than humans do, and scientists are very well aware of that. That's why today scientists test dogs and cats to see the levels of toxicity that's in a home. They don't test the human, they test the dog and the cat because they know they're spending most of the time at home. They're 1/5 to 1/10 your size. Imagine being a trainer and going into a house where the dog is short-circuiting and you're trying to rewire the brain in that type of environment of those VOCs. Imagine how hard that would be. That's why I don't envy your position. Trainers are the most incredible people in the world. A lot of them live in their cars. They just do it for the love of the animal. And like what you're doing, you're broadcasting this out to people in hopes of inspiring people to be a little bit better, right? Because then when you do a little bit better, you start doing more and more and more, right? I don't know unless we share that information. So trainers are the most incredible people in the world, and sometimes they get the shitty end of the stick because the environment is so bad around that animal. And so I call you and I say, hey, I want you to come fix my dog. And then you come in and you can see all of the issues that are happening. Volatile organic compounds, unfortunately, unless you can smell them, and there's many that are in your household that come from other things besides cleaning products that you can't smell, see, or taste, radon being one of them, which is a natural gas here in Nova Scotia. 50% of homes have excessive levels of radon. And then I bring you into my environment and I say, Tom, fix my dog. And then you try to fix my dog in that type of environment. Maybe I send him to you and you fix him because now he's in a clean environment, but then you send him back to me and I put him back in that same type of chemical soup that he's going into. And then he reverts right back to where he was. And then guess what I'm doing? I'm not sending my dog to Tom anymore. I sent him over there. He said he fixed him and he didn't. And he charged me money and I'm not happy. Meanwhile, you rehabilitated, you bettered that animal, but they were just sent back into an environment that you can't control. So it's such a sore spot for me. And it's such, I made these viral signs. You could probably see them. It's like, if you didn't see them on lawns right now, it's like, I shared a picture like last year and I shared it again this year. It's like 270 million views on it. It's a sign that says,
it's right there.
It's right there. It's so funny. It's right behind me. Chemically treated lawns can increase the risk of cancer by 70%, right? So this is a Purdue study. There's been many studies that have come out to show that chemical exposure to lawn chemicals can be toxic. And not only that, but your dog can also trail it and bring it into the house that can cause issues. So the environment outside is an issue. My neighbors, the reason why I made that sign is so I go outside and I here in suburban Nova Scotia, and my friggin' neighbors love green lawns and they don't care. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this sign and I'm going to put it there because they all have dogs, because everybody's spraying their lawns to destroy the weeds, as you may. And what happens is science can show there's a 50-foot drag. So imagine you got 4 neighbors that are spraying the lawns, but you don't spray because your head's up, Tom. I'm going to bombard your lawn just with air, with the wind taking those chemicals onto your lawn. Your dog goes outside and guess what? These are genotoxins. They can destroy his microbiome. One problem. You can't see it, you can't smell it, and you can't taste it, Tom, but it's in the household. So you're trying to rehabilitate a dog who's out laying in a lawn laden with chemicals, and it's a massive problem for that animal, disrupting his gut microbiome and disrupting his brain. So in terms of just cleaning products, because I'm going to rant forever on this, I'm very passionate about this. This is like...
Please do. Please do.
This is a hard spot for me because we're talking, as I mentioned to you earlier, things that are 10 to 2.5 microns big, smaller than a white blood cell. How are you going to see it? It's impossible. You try to have this conversation with somebody like, my house is clean, dude. I don't see anything in my house. It's because we're talking micron sizes. So the first thing that you should do, if you want to be a 2.0 pet parent, as we're having this conversation, is buy an indoor air quality meter, right? Like I have one. I will know at any point within my house if something is going on with my pet, right? So I get that many people can't afford these, but this is just like a Dyson. And it's showing me right now in the room that you and I are talking that the air quality is good. But there can be moments where they're not. So you see that little graph and that little bar that shoots up like that?
Yeah. And for people who are listening, it's just it's a little graph that kind of goes up, right? It's like a little peak there.
It's showing you the volatile organic compounds that are being released into the house at that one very moment. I have my beautiful mother and my father and their seniors that I help take care of. My mother, trying to talk to her about laundry detergent, you can't get her to listen. She always wants to use those fancy smelling laundry detergents, which are chaotic on animals, especially people that wash their bedding in these type of volatile organic compound laden solutions. So my mother comes down with a basket of laundry and triggers my VOC meters.
Whoa.
Now imagine, I wash my dog's bed in laundry detergent that has scented products in it. Imagine I wash my dog's collars, which is the majority of people do, harnesses, leashes. You wonder why sometimes dogs break out around the neck area, start losing fur and so on and so forth, because these people will spray actually Febreze on the collars, Tom, to try, because they stink so bad. Meanwhile, that those volatile organic compounds are coming in contact with the skin. It's a discussion that most people aren't even having with their poor veterinarian who's trying to figure out what the hell is going on with this animal's fur. But nobody said, hey, yo, I'm spraying or I'm washing these products in these scented chemicals that are really high in volatile organic compounds. So this is such an issue. In our second book, we showed people how to make...
What's this book called, Rodney, your second book?
It's called The Forever Dog Life. And so the first book that we wrote, The Forever Dog, was traveling the world looking for the longest lived dogs and then translating it into bite-sized pieces of information. Here I am sounding like I'm plugging my damn book.
Please do.
But that was the why, right? And everybody wanted the how. Everyone was like, okay, well, how do I fix? You showed us all the science, but how do we do it? So according to the CDC in your country, Tom, this is a DIY air purification system. So it's a $20 box fan, and in the back is a $10 filter. Okay, so you can just buy this on like whatever online platform like Amazon or wherever you're at, and for $30 you can literally save your dog agony from indoor air particulate matter that you can't see. Now, when you're buying a filter, you want to make sure it's what's called a MERV 13. MERV 13 is a geek out nerd talk, Tom, so I have no friends because I talk about MERV 13 filters. A MERV 13 is like the higher you go up in the filtration world, we all have heard of HEPA. It's going to get finer particulate matter. So the higher that you go up in your MERV rating, you want to start grabbing things around 2.5 to 10 microns. You buy something with a MERV 13. I just bought a new one that's got charcoal in it because it can get gases like benzene. You tape it to the back of it. It sucks in your bad air. All of the particulate matter adheres to here, and then it spits out clean air. It vacuums your air for your dog. I've got people to make these. If you got $100, you can make 3 of them and put them on each level of your house. Turn it on for a few hours, vacuum the air of your house if you may, in layman terms. And then people start reaching out and DMing us. Oh my God, my dog's itchiness, my dog's sensitivity, the mast cell release that was happening, the histamine response in my dog has subsided immensely by using these air purifiers, because they can be expensive for a lot of people. But if you got $30, it can be life-saving for the room or the area in the house where your dog or cat spends most of their time.
That's excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I love that. Excellent information. And so for those of you who are listening again, I'm gonna put kind of like a description down and below. But let me just explain. He's got a box fan, like your traditional $20 you get at Walmart, Amazon box fan, and then you get one of those filters that you would put in like your furnace, or just those filtration systems that are cheap. You can go at Lowe's, Home Depot, wherever you live, whatever your warehouse store is, and you just, what are you taping that on?
You tape it on the back. The easiest thing, honestly, Tom, would go to the CDC's website, the Center for Disease and Control in the United States. Hopefully I got that right, Center for Disease and Control. Yeah, CDC in the US. We don't have it here in Canada. And just type DIY air purifier. They were telling people how to make these during COVID, right? Like people that were trapped in their homes during COVID. They are, especially if there's areas where there's forest fires, and that can really wreak havoc on your dog's immune system. It's the best protection unit with somebody can build within a home. The New York Wire actually did a review on these things. They were 85% air cleanup, according to the University of California, Davis. And not only did they purify the air by 85%, but they were outperforming $1,000 units. So they're absolutely fantastic. Wow. Now, the only thing they don't have, which my Dyson, let's say, would have, and I'm not plugging Dyson by any means, I have that little meter that shows when there's VOCs released in my house, because how else would I otherwise know if I've even cleaned the air? You can go onto and again, I'm not promoting Amazon because I know there's some people that aren't huge fans, but let's just say wherever you buy your stuff, you can buy what's called an indoor air quality monitor. They're about $40. And it tells you if there's something wreaking havoc in the household that's going to affect your dog's immune system, their skin, if it's going to break them out, inflame them. There's so many things in your house that off gas that you just have no idea. And especially new homes. the times when I talk to people whose animals are like in this chronic state of like allergy like symptoms, it's in brand new homes because there's so many things in that house that are off gassing and you can't control that.
Yeah, and I also just think, again, for the listeners and even watchers of this podcast, as we continue to dive into a bigger scope of dogs, wanting to help dogs and their owners, this is just going to become more. And listen, when my wife told me, Rodney, that we couldn't use the really, really nice smelling Tide, I was like, no, that's I'm not. And even the spray on the counters, I was like, no. And and it was hard for me because I'm I like my comfort things. And it was like that with food too, Rodney. Like when I had to stop eating super processed food. And I haven't been eating processed food for probably 5 years now. And I'm trying, I'm biohacking, I'm in the sauna, I'm in the cold plunge, I'm running, I'm taking vitamins, I'm doing everything I can to live a healthier life for my kids. One, and then for me is secondary. And if you've listened to the podcast before, you've heard me talk about these things. But it was hard for me. So you might be thinking you're sitting at home going, the Tide is $9.99 at Target, or the Gain, it smells so good. But I have seen, like my son, again with sensitive skin and a biome that was juvenile or mature for his age. Even if he, like when all my grandparents had to change their detergent, because even when they came over, if they were to hold my son at a very early age when he couldn't hold up his head and stuff, he would start breaking out. I can't, like that's that signal of your mother coming downstairs with the laundry detergent, the traditional popular laundry detergent, and your scale going, this is a problem. Like the air quality is now changed. Is all you should need to know. Holy crap, this stuff is actual poison. And the problem is, again, I'm 36 years old. I have two young kids, but my whole life has been manipulated by marketing, right? So you see the Tide, it's got this really cool logo. They have the best ads with all these people having fun. It feels good. It's nostalgic. It's what you smelled growing up. It's what you liked. It's what reminds me of your mom and your dad, and coming home from school and laundry and soccer practice. It's just that's their job, right? And so just for people out there, because I talk about my own personal struggles and of course my change and what's bettered my life, because that's how I learned, right? Like I learned off other podcasts about eating cleaner and better products, and that's why I'm regurgitating now to hopefully help some people. But one of the things that really changed me was spraying down the counters that my son, my two boys, I have two boys, eat off of. And I'm like, my wife was like, you realize that you go out and you buy organic raspberries, you buy organic bananas and organic blackberries, because my kids are just fruit fanatics, which is great. Then you put it on the counter spray that you go buy at Target. What's your it's like it's reversing everything. And so I will just say to people, you might the first time I started hearing these things, I rejected it. I said, no way, I'm not stopped eating this, and I'm not stopped eating this, and blah, blah, blah. And then slowly but surely I was educated on how different a life you can live, and hopefully to what you have spent not all your life, but a majority of your life doing, is helping dogs live longer through healthier options and less processed things. But I just want to say, people who are listening and watching, your brain will automatically start rejecting. I'm not going to stop using Tide. I'm not going to stop using Febreze. My dogs stink. I'm not going to stop using these things. And I've learned something from this podcast. I am that guy, Rodney, that wants a green lawn. Yeah. For my whole life, and just to give you context, this may be a little therapy session. My whole life, we grew up and we always had we never had we had sand, we had dandelions, we had crabgrass, and I saw all the other Joneses, if you will, have these nice manicured, nice mow long lines in the lawn, like the American dream, if you will, of like a nice lawn. So when I purchased my home, one of the things I really craved, maybe from the lack thereof, the ability, the financial stability when I was a kid growing up, was like, I want a nice lawn. I want to keep up. I want to fit in with my neighbors. And now I'm realizing that one of the first things you said at that 8-month mark, where Burley, my dog, had started to get some blisters or some bubbles or some reactions, could have been that. And now I'm like, now I'm going to have dandelions again. And it's the same thing. It's just crazy, like how much I've learned. And the more it's almost like you can't unsee. Same thing with deodorant. Like it's just crazy. You never would think about men and women who put on deodorant every day. You're literally putting it into the pores of your body that sweat and secrete all throughout the day. And once you realize how, I'm a big Old Spice guy. My grandpa wore Old Spice. My dad wore Old Spice. And I wore Old Spice almost my whole life until recently, where I was like, putting the pit grease on, and it was literally just. And it's the same thing with dogs. Like the more you realize, like these flashy, fancier things, there's a reason why they cost less, and there's a reason why they put so much money into marketing what they do, and so it's just a huge eye-opening thing. And I want to be mindful of your time. I did a post on questions, and so hopefully it went through.
Can I jump in with
please.
Your brilliant statement that you just gave? Because you gave me a moment of reflection, because you're right. Pine Sol, and I'm not attacking the company, it reminds me of my grandmother, because my grandmother would always clean with Pine Sol. I never like you're saying this to me, and I'm like, man, he's right. Like, there's so much comfort to these things, that these nostalgic scents that bring back the memories of our family members, right? One thing, like what you're addressing, according to science, when I was invited to give my second TED Talk in Mexico City with Dr. Karen Becker, and there was this brilliant speaker that came on before me talking about challenging somebody's belief system. So in other words, if I came to you and I said, hey, that your Old Spice deodorant, it was just recalled in the US, you can Google that, and it's full of what's called benzene, that's why it's recalled, and that's a known carcinogen that can create cancer. You're going to shut off, because I've just challenged your world belief system, because maybe that Old Spice reminds you of a family member or a time in your life. So it's like, stop, right? And then according to the scientists, what makes it even worse is when you present somebody with facts as to why that's a problem. So I just said to you, hey, look, there's a big giant nationwide recall. It was full of benzene. It's a known carcinogen. The backfire effect, the more facts that I give Tom, the more that he repels that information. And so the speaker at this TED Talk said, before that you start jumping into somebody and challenging the world belief system, because the second that you challenge Tom, it triggers the amygdala in his brain. It's the survival mechanism within all of us. Oh, this guy's trying to change the way that I think. Absolutely not. It's not going to happen. Relate with an individual first before presenting information, and try to lure somebody in. Not lure is not the best word, but attract somebody with a story rather than pushing information on them. Tom, today, and this is a known fact, it's in every headline around the world, we have more people in under 50 with cancer than we've ever had ever, up 80%. There used to be the argument that the reason why there's so much cancer is because we have better diagnostic tools. And the scientists took that into consideration in the research, and they said, no, it's the environment and it's the microbiome that's changing with people. There was multiple studies that came out during 2020 that showed, you remember the gasoline that you had mentioned, the gasoline cleaners? People were going out buying toilet bowl cleaners from like cheapies to clean their toilet bowls during 2020. The scientists found that children were struggling with language, meaning it was taking them longer to learn language. And what they found was that those toilet bowl cleaners actually disrupted the microbiome of those children, slowing down their learning and their speech process. Imagine what that's doing to your dog or cat that's at home, because we know that they're absorbing 10 to 20 times the load of these great smelling things that you talk about. And I think that was the biggest way that Dr. Becker and I were able to communicate to people. So rather than me saying to you, hey, Tom, your deodorant is causing cancer for you, what I can show you is that the Dog Aging Project did a study and can show that cosmetics like perfumes, like deodorant, like female makeup will actually fall off, get on the ground, and your dog will come through it, absorb it, it gets into his body, and they're able to detect it in the blood and the urine. And I can only tell you what that havoc that's wreaking onto your pet. People are more inclined to listen then than to themselves. And that's how we call it health traveling up the leash. And so that's how we're able to relay that information. So I'm glad that you brought that up to me, because you're right. Those scents are comfort scents. And there's probably a better way to relay information to pet parents sometimes when you're attacking those comfort scents. Because in my brain, it was like, well, it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you come off that scent? Well, because it could have meaning for somebody. So anyways, sorry, you're on your questions.
No. It exactly. It reminds me of my grandpa, who's no longer with us. It's like that's what he did. And it's the same thing. It's like it's psychology 101, right? Like you didn't have something, now you can. And so you do it, right? So you feel like that suppression and that I want to do it, but I can't. And then when you finally get the opportunity, you do it. And so listen, people, and I've absolutely, I've heard people talk about you. And it wasn't until recently I started digging into your stuff. I was like, I gotta reach out to this person. And Rodney, I can't express my gratitude for you coming on because for me, it's just such a learning experience. Again, as a student, I'm trying to learn as much as I can about dogs. I'm trying to help other people learn. Because again, me learning other things from other people who have spent time, 20 plus years, you and Dr. Becker, doing TED Talks and Mark Zuckerberg telling you to come speak at face. Like these are things like for dog behavior and training. That's what I do. That's what I'll always do. Right. And so to have somebody else like on you to share these things, like again, changing all of the things that has helped me become healthier and could even, we don't know, could even potentially help me live longer. Maybe potentially even help my kids live longer.
Absolutely.
Is invaluable. And so it's huge. And I'm so glad that you have come on. And I got a couple questions. And
let's do it.
I'll pick two of them that I think will be good for you. So Tommy Blackburn, he's a friend of mine in Tennessee. I can't afford raw currently, but trying to find the healthiest dog food or healthiest food for my dogs. And I'm sure this resonates with anybody out there who can't really afford raw food or can't get it. What can people do to feed their dogs a healthier diet?
So this is an awesome question, and a question that we get all the time. When you start to look at food, it's really hard, Tom, to segregate foods into categories. Imagine we've been talking for now 2+ hours and we didn't talk about nutrition once. We talked about, that's how these topics are so big, and maybe in another time on another podcast, we just talk pure nutrition. First and foremost, it's changing the perception in people's minds as to what they're looking at when they're looking at food. So to answer that question, the closer that one can get to feeding a less adulterated food, a less minimally processed food, the better for the animal. And we have multiple studies to show that. So if we were to break down, let's just talk about ultra-processed, processed, and minimally processed, right? These terms come from what's called the NOVA food classification system. The brilliant Brazilians designed it to try to classify for people where food falls into categories. So think corn, minimally processed, canned corn, processed, and delicious corn chips, ultra processed. And if you correlate that to food, you would be looking at, hypothetically speaking, extruded dry food would be your ultra processed. Commercial bought home cooked diets are usually processed. And then DIY balanced meals made at home, minimally processed. So a lot of categories can fall in the minimally processed, Tom. So you've got DIY homemade food at home, whether you feed it raw or lightly cooked. We found the longest lived animals in the world ate both. If you look at man's garbage, where dogs have evolved his whole life eating, man started cooking his food became more digestible, which is, they say, why his brain advanced more and why he became the superior, if you may, according to some people. Although I'd argue sometimes dogs are better than people, but regardless, you fall into a bucket in the minimally processed realm, you're usually in good shape. Those are foods that include raw or cooked at home, homemade, commercial available raw or commercial available lightly cooked, freeze drying. We have a lot of science in freeze drying, 95% nutrient retention in freeze drying, and some dehydration processes can fall in that minimally processed bucket. So it doesn't matter where you are there, but as long as you're in that bucket and the closer you can get, the better. When you get down to the ultra processed, way down at the bottom, we know like semi-moist, like when you go into stores and you buy that Alpo that's really spongy, it takes a lot, like propylene glycol and a whole bunch of chemicals to make that thing spongy. And it usually comes with a lot of like mold rate. You want to avoid that food. Ultra processed food, dry kibble. I'm not trying to vilify it because I understand that people that are on a budget, that's all they can feed. Here's the hardest part in the world when you're discussing nutrition to people, Tom. The APPA, the American Pet Product Association, did a U.S. statistic on how much the average pet parent is spending on food. Take a guess right now. If I said to you, how much is the average pet parent spending on food a year, according to a month, according to the APPA?
I would say a month per one dog.
Per one dog.
$150.
$22
Per month.
per month is the average U.S. statistic of how much a U.S. citizen is spending on pet food. So one doesn't have to feel bad when they can't afford to feed raw, because imagine if you're going to try to educate people on feeding nutrition and you want to try to inspire as many people as possible, and you know that you have a $22 budget, it becomes difficult, right? So this is where you got to be very creative in terms of how do I feed my dog? We know that when you feed kibble, dry kibble, it has to go through what's called an extruder. According to Harvard University, any foods that go through an extrusion where you break the food matrix of the food and you get it into a shape that you desire because it's got to go through a dye is considered ultra processed. So when it's ultra processed, you can't really have a whole bunch of microbial activity like good bacteria in that bag, because you're going to get a party that's going on in there that you're not going to like. So that food usually has to be sterile. Okay, so now you have an ultra-processed food bag that's shelf-stable with additives that's normally stable that can stay on a shelf. How do you improve that? Step one would be your refrigerator, obviously. We know that with multiple published studies, adding anything minimally processed, meaning something from your refrigerator, or maybe your friend comes to your house and you lend them a patty of raw, which is 8 ounces, every tablespoon, according to Finnish scientist Dr. Anna Helm-Bjorkman and her team, that you add of something minimally processed, the things that we discussed before, into a bowl of ultra-processed, you can reduce disease markers, homocysteine and methionine, inflammatory markers, by up to 20%, every tablespoon. So imagine for somebody that's starting, that has no money, just starting in your refrigerator, removing a tablespoon of something from that ultra-processed food bowl and bringing in something minimally processed, according to science, you can see some huge benefit. Purdue University did a study on, and I heard, because I listened to the podcast with you and Evan Doggett. I wanted to, because like I'm a big fan of both of you now, and I heard Evan bring that up to you, the Purdue University study. They wanted to know just how impactful adding something fresh to a bowl of ultra-processed food was. So imagine you're cutting your carrots at home, the tip of your carrot. You're cutting your mushrooms, the stem that people don't eat. You're cutting your broccoli, the stalk that somebody doesn't eat, usually man's garbage that makes its way into compost. Adding that 3 times a week into a bowl of kibble. In studies, on a 12-year study on Scottish Terriers, reduce the incidence of bladder cancer by anywhere between 70 to 90%. Now, we could talk scientifically why that happened.
Wow.
But some of the most incredible bioactives, Dr. William Lee, incredible food scientist, did the TED Talk on foods that prevent or will combat cancer. If you have no money and you call up a pizza restaurant, you know the little stem, the bottom part of the mushroom that people throw in the garbage because it's impossible to chew through?
Absolutely.
According to Dr. William Lee and food scientist Tom, you have double the amount of bioactives, double the amount of fiber, double the amount of beta-glucans in the garbage that people throw, which is your mushroom stem. You call up a pizza restaurant, you say, hey man, I'll order my pizza from you weekly, but can you take all your mushroom stems and just put them in a bag and I'll come get them? A published study shows that consuming 2 mushrooms a week for a human lowers the incidence of cancer by 45%. 2 mushrooms, Tom. 18 grams has the possibility. Mushrooms are just culinary that you and I can both eat. 2 mushrooms a day, just Google 2 mushrooms a day, 45% drop in cancer. Adding those into your dog's food, I can show you multiple published studies on research on what that can do to your dog's immune system just to better it. So I get that a lot of people can't feed raw, and I feel for those people, because obviously everybody wants to feed minimally processed. But anything that you can normally reach for that's minimally processed and swap it out for something that's already ultra processed in that bowl, you're going to see benefit. And that's a really small tip of the iceberg on like a few hour conversation that we could have on nutrition and all the nutrition science that we currently have on the benefits of feeding minimally processed foods. But anything that you're going to feed, obviously you want to make sure it's balanced, obviously, right? Because when you make dog food, it's basically making baby formula. It's not as easy as at home as making a diet with like ground beef, carrots, and rice, let's just say. That's not really a balanced diet. It's going to upset your veterinarian first and foremost, because he's going to be like, oh my gosh, Tom, you're missing so many things in there to balance your diet properly. So you want to make your vet happy. So as long as you have something balanced as your staple diet, you can swap things in and out according to science, 10% or less, and you will not affect the balance of that food according to research.
Do you know what particular mushroom that is? Is that any mushroom?
I'm a huge, listen, you just as a tsunami, you don't want to open with me. Look, what we know that like mushrooms can go in grades, right? So obviously we know about medicinal mushrooms. So we are talking things like shiitake, maitake, reishi, turkey tail mushroom. The most famous study in dog cancer research, hemangiosarcoma. This was done by Penn State Vet School. Hemangiosarcoma, one of the most aggressive cancers in the world, median lifespan average of around 80 days. Tom, the researchers took a bowl of like dry kibble and they had 2 cohorts of dogs with hemangiosarcoma. The dogs that got turkey tail mushroom at 100 milligrams per kg per day, so basically that's around 3,000 milligrams of turkey tail mushroom a day for a 50-pound dog. Those dogs lived on average 1 year longer with hemangiosarcoma, read the study, versus the dog that didn't get any turkey tail mushroom. A new published paper on shiitake mushroom. Shiitake falls into the medicinal mushroom category, but you can find it at any local grocery store. People put it in their spaghetti and their pasta. Dogs fed shiitake mushroom showed an improved immune system and less inflammation in their body. Peer-reviewed study that was published. 2 years ago and last year, 2 papers published, peer-reviewed on chaga, the king of medicinal mushrooms. That's all we have up here in Nova Scotia. Chaga mushroom creates what's called apoptosis, pre-programmed cell death in cancer cells. So now in oncology, one of the key things that you want to start adding would be chaga mushroom. But even the lonely button mushroom, right? The just dirty old button mushroom, even canned mushroom, according to human scientists, is enough to see benefit in the body if you're getting into those type of culinaries. I think the thing that messes people up is that when they see button mushroom, cremini, and portobello in the grocery store, they don't realize it's the same mushroom, just different growth phases. So the button mushroom, the white mushroom, is the baby phase. The cremini is a few weeks later, and then the portobello is a few weeks after that. Same mushroom, just different growth span.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That's probably the biggest thing I took away from this whole podcast.
I got weird science facts.
No, that's great. I love that. I love that. So one thing I'll just say too, and if you listen to that podcast I did with Evan, I take mushrooms every day. I take it now. I have this new D.O.G.S matcha that I have because I'm a sissy and my body can't do normal coffee anymore. Unfortunately, it has a lot of matcha, just regular matcha with mushrooms.
So both coffee and tea, they suppress what's called in your body the mammalian target of rapamycin, mTOR. So it's longer life. So multiple published studies on those that drink matcha, green tea, black tea, and you can give that to your dogs, by the way, which is why in our first and second book, we show you teas, detox teas that you can add into the diet. Those that are long-lived, multiple published studies on you live longer drinking teas. Sorry, I cut you off, but you get your mushroom.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I drink, so I have this, I still drink mud water, which has all of the mushrooms in it, the chaga, reiki, the lion's mane, but this matcha is blended with mushrooms too, so you get a lot of nootropics, and it's great. I love it. It's called D.O.S, D-O-S-E, not affiliated, just really want to share what I've been dealing with. One other question is going to be, if you had to feed your dog a kibble, knowing everything you know about ultra processed food and the benefits of not so much processed food, what kibble would you choose?
What an awesome question. So pending on the adulteration process of the kibble, meaning how many adulteration steps, kibble has to go through a lot of steps, right, Tom? So it's not, I used to think that you would put like steak and broccoli and all these wonderful ingredients and then kibble will come out on the end. It's not really how it works. If you Google any type of published study on how kibble is made, it's usually ultra-processed ingredients first that go into the ultra-processed machine that make the ultra-processed food, which is why we say that dry extruded kibble is ultra-processed, because these meals that go in there, when you turn around the back of the bag and you eat meat meal, chicken meal, whatever, these are rendered byproduct meats at the Renders Association that have ground it down into a powder for you, if you may, and then you're putting it into that bag of kibble. So the less adulteration steps you can avoid, the less things that you avoid that are harmful to your animal's body. As an example, advanced glycation end products. Multiple studies. We interviewed Dr. David Turner from the Cancer Research Facility in, God, I suck at U.S. geography. It's not Boston, but it'll come to me and I'll DM it to you. These scientists will show these advanced glycation end products are byproducts of the fault in how you make kibble, if you may, because the Maillard reaction is taking the starch and the protein and congealing it into a beautiful round circular ball. That Maillard reaction, which is like the top of the creme brulee, which is delicious, that's what's called advanced glycation end products. Those byproducts from that heat process, you have receptors on your cell called RAGEs, ironically enough. The second that advanced glycation end products come in contact with that, Tom, they age your organs. So they can show you dogs that have been consuming kibble that have gone through multiple rigorous steps that can actually speed up the aging process in your dog. Why am I telling you this? Because first and foremost, when I look at technologies today on how kibble is made, you'll start noticing there's a lot of bullshit label claims out there like this is baked, this is air dried, this is this is that. A lot of these don't actually have legal definitions and terms in the pet food industry. But one key indicator on a bag of kibble is the more synthetics that you see on the back of the kibble, normally, not in all cases, but normally the more adulteration step that kibble went through. So if you can find a kibble that's synthetic free, meaning balanced with whole foods, minus all those vitamins and minerals that you see in that synthetic pack on the back, the less adulteration that kibble went through. You may say to me, well, it's not a big deal. I'm not worried about advanced glycation end products. Why else should I give a shit about synthetics? That's because in 2007, Rodney and every other pet parent that experienced the great pet food recall, the synthetic vitamin pack that goes into kibble can be damaged from time to time, meaning you can have too much of a vitamin in there and it can kill your pet dead. In 2007, tens of thousands, if arguably hundreds of thousands of us across North America lost our pets. If you remember that time, I was feeding vet food at that time, Hill Science Diet, and that there was a melamine had made its way into that food and it destroyed my cat's kidneys. And it destroyed many pets around the world. Flash forward to 2019, before COVID hit and made everyone forget, Hill Science Diet had too much vitamin D in their food. And I know reports out of Chicago News, hundreds of pets lost their lives because there's too much vitamin D in that food. That synthetic vitamin mix makes foods cheaper, but it comes with a risk. And if the machine is faulty, it could literally be night and day for your pet in terms of one day being on the planet, the next day being in heaven. So if I had to choose a kibble, the two things I want to know is, one, is it balanced with whole foods and I can avoid synthetics? Awesome. And two, depending on the technique, talk to your retailer. I want to buy a food with the least amount of adulteration steps to avoid all of the byproducts that could be created in that kibble that, according to science, can affect the lifespan long-term of my pet. One last example. Here's another good example. And this one, because I know I can go forever. Have you heard of titanium dioxide?
No.
The EWG just did a report showing that titanium dioxide is a genotoxin, meaning it can damage your dog's genes. Titanium dioxide, Tom, is the chemical that's in like paint solvents and glues. It gives it that shiny look. The pet food industry, when they make pet food, it comes out gray and looks gnarly, man. So how do I make it shine and make the fats look marbled? So when you're looking in a can or you're looking at a bag and it's glittering, I can use like small mirror-like crystals that are called titanium dioxide. You'll see it on milk bones. You'll see it in a whole host of products. Now, we've spent the last 2 years with viral content getting manufacturers to be better and to remove the product, but there's still many that have it in there. Manufacturers use it to whiten as well their foods before they add food color and food additives into the food. Food colors, by the way, if I'm a trainer, is one thing I want to avoid. Brazilian scientists will show when you're using colors, red dye number, like you got red number 5 or red 40, yellow 5, blue number 1. I'm sure I'm got those numbers in incorrect formats, but go with me on it. When you're using these colorful dyes, Brazilian researchers did a study on what's called ponço, which is a dye. It actually increases anxiety in animals. So if I'm a trainer trying to train an anxious dog, one of the reasons and cofactors could be the dyes that are in the food that are disrupting that dog's brain. And I'm having a hard time trying to relay information to that dog. So you want to see if that food has food dyes. Usually titanium dioxide will come in first to whiten it, and then they add the food dyes next. So when you avoid that synthetic vitamin mix I was talking about, not only do you avoid the potential for too much of a vitamin to be sprayed and harm your pet, but you can also reduce certain genotoxic compounds that not only will damage the body, but will actually.
And so when you're talking about all these chemicals and these like little crystals, so there's so much to answer that Instagram question from Dan Sabo. Yeah. Oh, I knew I wasn't going to get Arcana. Beneful. I knew I wasn't going to get that. I knew that, and that's great. So this is kind of like a turning point, I think, in my podcast, just in general, to have somebody like you on, because again, I really, and I've had some holistic veterinarians on recently. I just had an oncologist veterinarian on, just posted today, and we're starting to have all these people with real profound information that can really change the trajectory. And that's my goal, is not just I talking to you off camera. Prior to this, I really, I have the #1 dog training podcast in the world, but I want the #1 dog podcast in the world, because that means that I am helping as many dogs out as we can, not just with behavioral training and all of that fun stuff, but it's also just learning about all these things. And so I am so grateful and excited to connect with you, because I know that this is going to be a friendship that will flourish into, it seems for me, I have all these ideas that I'm in my head. I'm like, we could do this and we could do this, because I'm just passionate about, because it's just an organic thing that's happened in my own life of just education. Hey, did you know that, and so thank you so much for hopping on. Please plug what you have. I know you have a couple books out. Do you have anything coming up in the near future? Do you have any talks people can see you at? I'm going to put all your social media handles in the bottom, but please plug how people can find you and what you have cooking.
Yeah, well, so we're all over social. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard not to find us in your news feed, because we're always pumping out new information, new content, things on like spay and neuter and like better procedures and food and behavior, all of the things that you can think about, sharing new science, trying to better people. You could find it either at Planet Paws or at Dr. Karen Becker or at the Forever Dog. You'll constantly see, I'd like to say every day, but a few times a week at least, some new science that can really help motivate and inspire pet parents trying to raise longer, live happier pets.
Amazing. And plug your 2 books, right? You have 2 books out. Is that correct?
Yeah. I got the Forever Dog. You know what? So I don't have the English. It's so funny. Here it is in Korean, I believe. So we wrote apparently they tell us it's the #1 selling dog health book in the entire world. It's translated into 24 languages globally. #1 New York Times bestseller, The Forever Dog. And we just wrote the Forever Dog Life, which is the how-to book of how to either do DIY meals at home, supplements backed by science that can help your dog's lifespan. And then the other half of the book is how to create a better non-toxic home with DIY options for soaps, shampoos, ear cleaners, and so on and so forth. So thank you for giving me
Love
the book.
that. Oh, of course. I mean, but again, for me, it's not so much of, hey, here's something. And I know obviously, because you even forgot to put in your books, it's not a financial gain for you, or it's not the incentive. The incentive here, guys, is to educate. It's to help. It's to provide a different set of information that we have been force-fed our entire lives of, this is what's good, take this, squeeze this, pop this, feed this, spray this. Like, there is alternatives out there that are better for you, that are healthier for you, and they can help you and your dog live longer, and potentially anybody else in your home that you care about, even your neighbors. And so, Rodney, thank you so much,
Absolutely,
sincerely,
brother.
for coming on. I think this is going to be. I think I'm going to see you again.
We got to do it in person another time.
100%. I'm already thinking of logistics here. Don't worry. So thank you so much again. I appreciate you, and we'll touch base soon. And thank you, everybody, for listening.